everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I am your host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, I have Josh Torres.
I'm glad this is going to be an easy episode. No big games, no new news. It's going to be easy.
Yeah, very straightforward. We have Adam Vitale.
Hello.
We have James Galizio.
Boy, am I glad no RPGs came out this week.
We have Chow Min Woo.
You sure?
And joining us, we've got Colin Black.
Hashtag Clive Hive.
Batman.
So it's the usual crew here today. If we're being a bit coy for no good reason, but obviously the big talking point for this week's podcast is going to be, of course, the release of Final Fantasy XVI. We discussed it very briefly with the demo release last week. We kind of said, hey, we're going to discuss the game in full when it launches, a couple days ago, and just talk about it this week. We have brought Colin Black on board because he was our main reviewer for Loop 8 Summer of Gods. I'm just kidding. No, we're going to do
finally here to talk about Loop 8.
Final Fantasy 16. Yeah. So I think most everyone here has at least dabbled a little bit in Final Fantasy 16, except Adam. We also have pinged Alex Donaldson. He also covered the game for VG247. He'll either be here this week or potentially next week. But Cullen wrote up a review for us on the site. James has also played through the game. I know me, Josh, and Chow have also, since the game has launched, put differing amounts of time into it. So we're all pretty much on the same page here. So, of course, we're going to open up with Final Fantasy 16. So if all five of us, plus Adam, are playing Final Fantasy 16, Cullen, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you to start with. And to cue you up, to tee you in, I'm going to say, what makes you the most qualified individual on staff?
There's a job interview now. Okay. There's like a post-mortem job interview.
My mom likes me next.
Okay, being silly. So Final Fantasy 16, that's a big game to review. Just when you got, you knew that you were going to cover this game for us and went into it. Just what were your expectations going in? What's your history with the series? Were you just kind of going to go with the flow? What was your thought process as you booted up this game?
It was very interesting. I don't know how much this is. I don't think I stated this in my actual review itself, but fun fact, I have never reviewed a brand new AAA game before, like ever, and I've been doing reviews for like over half a decade now, I think. So I was pretty surprised.
What about on your YouTube channel?
No, well, typically my channel isn't big enough to get those AAA game codes, but so yeah, in regards to Final Fantasy in general, I'd have to say I think my first ever Final Fantasy game was when I was a kid, and I got Crystal Chronicles for like Christmas, and then I proceeded to just not pay attention to the series outside of like Kingdom Hearts until I was a teenager, I think.
If you're starting with Crystal Chronicles, I could see why that might be the outcome.
Oh, I love Crystal Chronicles. I don't have enough time to get into how much I love Crystal Chronicles, but that is like the perfect thing to hit you hard if you're a particular kind of person as a kid. It's great, but that's besides the point. I was pretty late in jumping into Final Fantasy. I think I played 7 for the first time when I was I want to say like 17. That was about 10 years ago. So I don't have this like lifelong love of Final Fantasy, but I do genuinely love the series.
Was 7 your first mainline?
I think it was. 7 was my first mainline, and 4 was the first mainline I beat. And I don't really care for 4 too much anymore. That's maybe a heretical take.
But I think here there's a few people that think that 5 and 6 are the better entries for the SNES.
Oh, they're way better. Yeah, no contest. But yeah, so jumping into 16, since this game got announced, maybe it was just because it's like, oh my god, a PS5 game, an actual PS5 game.
Yeah.
It's
what's
coming out. It got me really excited. I was sold pretty much right away because another thing about me is that I'm a big Ivalice head. I love the Ivalice games a lot, particularly like as the closer you get to Matsuno in that regard, like Final Fantasy Tactics, the more I kind of like vibe with that setting and that tone. And
That
I
remake
think
is coming out any day now.
any day now. Every single time we have a direct or a showcase, I'm like, this will be the day Final Fantasy Tactics comes back. This is gonna be it, and it never happens. Never.
No, I stayed up till 9 a.m. that day because I keep thinking Fire Emblem 4 news would come in.
Oh yeah, Final Fantasy Tactics, Fire Emblem 4 remake, the eternal release.
Like, it is rough to be a strategy RPG guy right now, particularly like me, because I all would have been okay if that Front Mission remake actually came out this month, but it didn't, and I'm seething and I'm coping so hard from it, and it's so sad. But as someone who is such a big fan of Final Fantasy Tactics, 16 felt like home. Like I feel like the game kind of has it definitely adores that game over all else, and I don't know if it hits all of like the highs with that kind of like political intrigue of its narrative, but it just felt like a modern take on that kind of tone and setting, which I really appreciated. Like, also, I love basically all Final Fantasy games. I could probably give defenses of almost any of them that aren't 3. But so like I was already primed to just have fun with this game, but after putting like 65 hours into it for my like month working on it, it's got issues, but it's one of my new favorites, I think.
I think the game would have been perfect if there was less padding. I think some people would say it's sometimes less is more. I don't know. That's for me.
Oh, let's get into it. Like, how far are you, Chow? And like, what do you think so far? Like, just follow up on like, what do you mean by padding?
Just the side quest. It's like if it's not like a character that you know, usually the side quest doesn't lead to anything interesting. Or maybe it's just how the side quest is done. It feels like it's just quest taken from MMOs. I mean, I don't know, from Square Enix, they made one of the best MMOs of all time. You would think the side quest could be a little bit more engaging, I guess. Like, I feel like the only good side quest I did so far is from that really racist town, if you know what I'm talking about. The one near the shore.
I know what you're talking about because those side quests in that area are like the most memorable to me. I wish there was sort of more of that.
Well, generalizing a bit, so obviously a lot of the talent behind Final Fantasy 16 is from the talent that rebooted Final Fantasy 14. Who here has put significant time into 14? Because I'll say I haven't.
Me, but James is probably going to beat us all in this regard.
I know.
I heard his playtime last night.
Yeah, literally last night, we were in a voice call with a couple of friends and came to the realization that so I have like 2,650-ish hours in the game. A buddy of ours, she has like 2,880, and I was like, oh wow, we're not too far off in playtime. And Colin's here like saying, I have 200 hours in the game.
Oh yeah,
and that's a lot for me.
A mere 200 hours.
A mere 200.
That's a respectable amount of time.
Oh, okay. Update on that. I actually have 378, but still,
I take it back.
Mere 378.
I think I have 500 something hours. The last time I remember something.
Once you go over 200, it's the degenerate hours now.
Oh no.
Because I've read a few things where like apparently there are some Final Fantasy 14 references that, of course, going over my head, but even so some like mechanical things, like talking about side quests, the fact that you have to confirm which items like you're handing in apparently is like straight from Final Fantasy 14.
Yep.
Like UI or UX. So I'm like, oh, okay. Because that is
game.
Go ahead.
This game is just straight up built on top of the framework that 14 made. Like, it's obviously like greatly like upgraded in pretty much all respects, but it's like Bedrock is legitimately the same as 14.
But before we go into go ahead, Josh.
It's just generally like, even for people who like don't play 14, if they like ever seen like some gameplay or shots of 14, like they'll be the first to tell you, spectate. It's like, yeah, this game looks like 14, like because of like a lot of the like the typesetting, the presentation, the font. It's like, yeah, what you would think of like 14's aesthetics, like presentation wise, like that's the represented in this game, like just at first glance. If you even have a smidge of like familiarity that like how 14 looks.
So before we go into like the side quests, which Chow just opened up into, taking a shot at it. Let's talk about just like the general like narrative premise, because before the in the marketing cycle for this game, Yoshida and Takai and the whole development crew basically stated that they put a very strong emphasis on wanting to tell a good, complete, full story. And I even kind of thought as I was playing through this game, I obviously am comparing and contrasting playing Final Fantasy 15 versus 16, because of course you're going to do that. And the one thing that kind of caught my like mind is that how Final Fantasy 15, I don't remember exactly the order of things that came out, but it was like a messy launch in terms of like having the Kingsglaive movie, having the anime, having like the all the other like media tie-in events or whatever. Where here it's just kind of like it's a singular product with like there's like an art book, and there's like obviously the way too many trailers, but I do kind of like how it's just compartmentalized into like a single focused thing rather than this like shotgun blunderbuss of ideas kind of all over the place. That was my impressions going into Final Fantasy 16, is that it just seems very coherent in terms of being what it wants to be. So Cullen, as you played through the game, you said you were like excited and eager from the jump, and you said you were really kind of enthused by the more pure fantasy setting of this. It doesn't have quite the same touch of Magitech or modern setting as like 13 or 15 had. So what was your impression like just going through the story of this game? And I guess I'll state clearly that we're going to be no spoiler, only things that were kind of introduced in the premise or the trailers at this point in time.
So I apparently 16 story is a bit contentious. If you just kind of ask around to different reviewers. Without getting too much into it, because you really cannot like have a nuanced discussion on the way this game like succeeds and fails at this current point without spoilers. Everything pretty much hit for me. I totally get a lot of the critique itself, but I do think this is one of the most consistent in quality from like gameplay to narrative Final Fantasy game we've gotten since 10. Because I was thinking about it, and I feel like every game since 10, not counting the MMOs, or maybe still counting 1.014, has just felt like whatever vision they originally had got messed with at some point, or something got in the way, like either like technically or hardware wise, like something was compromised in all of these games. And this does just feel like everything they wanted to include, they got in there. Everything is pretty polished. It feels like a complete vision in a way that we have not seen the Final Fantasy series kind of have in so long.
Like 2 decades.
Yeah.
Finally, a Final Fantasy game not stuck in development hell.
Basically, there's no like, oh, they were gonna go this direction, but they ran out of dev resources, or that was a dropped idea, or this was gonna be part of like some greater Fabula Nova Crystallis mythos. Oh wait, that was a bad idea.
I think that's kind of giving it like every video game made always like has a planned document, and they choose what features they're gonna drop and what features they're gonna have. And there's no video game out there that's like, it's definitely gonna have 100% of like.
We're not saying the cutting through. We're not saying the cutting room floor doesn't exist.
Yeah, but what I was trying to get at is, I think, because obviously, there's stuff that they probably wanted to do but couldn't because dev cycle got a bit rushed at the end or what have you. But I think that this one works around it in a way where most people probably won't think, okay, I can see where you guys got completely compromised and something had to shift. Like 12, for instance, that was originally a Matsuno game, and then he had to leave the project. And then while 12 is amazing, and I love 12, it is very obvious that like he had like a series of ideas and story beats that were implemented, and then you can tell where other people kind of came in to try to connect the dots. Or you look at 13, which they had all these lofty ambitions for that, but then the hardware of the time kind of limited them to really like compressing the scope of that game, and that's why like people call it a hallway simulator, because they kind of just couldn't do too much.
I think 13, my opinion, not being behind the curtain in terms of knowing what they intended, but it seems like they had this grand ambitions of having this multimedia project, how they said there was going to be like 3 games, a movie, a book, or whatever, and like they're like, oh wait, no, actually it's going to be just the games. Well, actually it's going to be 2 games. Well, actually one of those games is Final Fantasy 15 now. It's just like so it was just like they had like this giant ambition, and then they're like, oh wait, that's actually way more difficult than we thought it would be.
I'm glad that project's over.
You can there's plenty to be said about Yoshi P, but I will say he is incredibly good at keeping a project together and like making sure everybody stays on budget and working with what they got. The 14 expansions have really shown just like how competent of an organizer this guy is, and I think it does show in 16.
What are your thoughts on the combat, the gameplay? You know, there's a lot of discussion about this is not Final Fantasy, or this is Final Fantasy, or this is an action game, or I missed turn-based, or ATB, or whatever.
I knew it was a Final Fantasy game when I booted it up and it said Final Fantasy in it.
I was gonna say like when the box art said Final Fantasy on it.
When I bought a game from Square Enix called Final Fantasy, that's when I knew I bought a Final Fantasy game. But like I'm a big Devil May Cry fan. I love action games. I love character action games. I have my specific preferences on what makes those games good, and a lot of it boils down to how does it feel to play. Does it feel good? Do your moves connect in satisfying ways? And this, like, I think the last character action game I played was Bayonetta 3, and I think that game is not great, and it doesn't feel good, and a lot of it just does not work. And then you have the last good, really, really good feeling action game of that style in the last, like, 5 or so years was Devil May Cry, but that game's kind of old by now. Believe it or not, the game's like 5 years old. So
don't tell me that.
Yeah.
Well, it came out in early 2019, so it's closer to like 4.5.
Okay, that's basically 2018. But yeah, so it's like I realized while playing this, it's like, oh my god, we're so back. I don't terribly mind that it became an action game, because I feel like with how the series has been going in the last decade, like the writing's been on the wall, and I've been able to make peace with that. And I do hope that at some point Square can make some kind of like spin-off Final Fantasy series to appease the turn-based fans out there.
Just put a sticker on a box for Octopath Traveler 2 and have it say Final Fantasy 17. And I
don't know. I just don't think Octopath Traveler is like what the turn-based Final Fantasy people are looking for, honestly.
I mean, it was
because it's basically a saga game.
Yeah.
I mean, 13 feels like a saga game to me, because you get full HP back after every battle, which is like a saga game. I mean, I know, but it had that one mechanic. And that's
the one link.
All right. One. That's all we need.
I have one question. Why is this game under so much scrutiny for being an action game when 15 is also an action game in a way?
That's a good point.
It's like why?
It's also weird because it's like from both sides, right? Because like on some point, like some fans are doing that, but also for the devs because they label this as like the first true action RPG.
Yeah, I'll be honest. As someone that's almost finished the game, like basically just about done with it, I think, and this is, I guess, might be a larger discussion. For me, I think this game would be better if it was either went full, like 100% the way on action, or if it was more of an RPG. Because, like, as much as I like this game, and I agree with most of like Colin's review personally, but I feel like it's in a bit of a no man's land where it's like doesn't feel quite confident about what it wants to be, at least from my perspective.
I agree with that too, because I've learned that like the less I play it like a Devil May Cry game, the more I like it, because now I'm just like doing skill rotations off of their cooldowns and just like shredding stagger meters, and like I basically found like a complete loop on like what my things are, and like it's very different than how I would play a Devil May Cry game because of how the game
there is definitely
exploits how you can exploit systems in this game. And like I guess like the thing that I actually want to get to on that, like it doesn't really matter in my opinion if like if you can consider this an RPG or non-RPG, because everyone will have like their own thresholds on that, and there's like no right answer to that. But like I think the way that it tries to incorporate like RPG elements into it is like very shallow and uninteresting. For example, like the accessories that you equip, like for like skills specifically, like those are just going to be minor damage increases or reduce like cooldown on them.
Reduce
There's
cooldown
no-
of a single spell.
Yeah, of a single spell by like 3 seconds.
3 seconds. Yeah.
And it's not like there's nothing like in the accessory that really makes it feel like you're customizing your playstyle. It won't like give additional properties to like a skill. Like say, hey, like instead of you firing off like 1 fireball, it's like 2 fireballs or 3 fireballs now that'll home in. Like
No,
there's
it just
nothing like
recharges
that.
in 12 seconds instead of 15.
Yeah, and then like and everything and all the things that like you're equipping on your character outside of those accessories, like they don't like really have any additional effects aside from making the number go up. Like all the upgrade paths are very linear, and it's just making the number go up and not giving additional properties to like make the gameplay more varied and more customizable. So it's like it's one of those things that it's trying to contend being like, should we be an action game or an RPG? It's like, okay, well, just for the RPG people, we'll just throw this in there to make the number go up, and it'll maybe feel like an RPG, like for those fans. And like for me, it's just like I agree. Like I agree with James's sentiment that like I kind of wish they kind of pivoted to one way or the other more confidently instead of like trying to like have this like be in the center and be like, okay, we don't actually know where we want to go with
So
this.
I have a couple
I'd say
comments. So
it's-
first of all, I want to say, then I'll hand it back over to Cullen. This is my favorite Final Fantasy game since Final Fantasy 12. And maybe that's not a high bar, but it's a bar they met. And, other Final Fantasy games I quickly bounced off of in the last, 15 years. But this game has not been that. I'm enjoying myself immensely. When I read some criticisms, both in Cullen's review and Alex's review, and just in kind of the general zeitgeist about it not committing to be an RPG, I'll admit when I read that, I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, what does that criticism mean? But as I play it, it's kind of like one of those things that becomes apparent as you play it. For me, it's the resource management side of it. So after every battle, you get like resources, and these are like materials or upgrades or, gil or ability points. And like, you'll get these like resources that say used in crafting, like Magic Ash and Sharp Fang and Bloody Hide. I'm like, oh, that's neat. Like, these are stuff that I can use to improve my character. But then I just learned I was just like rolling in this stuff without even trying, with like really like nothing to spend it on. Like in the first like 10 hours of the game, I'd like visit the blacksmith, visit the shop, and like I either already made the best gear or the story just handed me a new weapon that's better than anything I can craft. So like I go into my item menu and I've got all these resources, and there's no need to manage them. You just are rolling in it, and there's nothing for me to spend it on, even if I wanted to. For me, that's like the RPG element to me that's the most apparent, is that I don't really need, there's no like build craft or theory craft or like gear allotment. You're kind of given.
Like, I'll tell you on top of like of what you're saying too. Like I just like it's sitting on top of like a shitload of gil. I have like maybe like 350k of gil and a shitload of like ability points. I have like over 10k ability points, and it's like I have no reason to like. There's nothing really interesting aside from like the tunes for the jukebox. You can really spend gil on. There's nothing interesting.
Oh yeah,
to really
like
spend gil on.
because
And then for your ability points, once you find like the build that like you're going for, like there's no really, you're not really incentivized to like spend more ability points than like what you need for like your current amount of skills, because you can only have like a total of 6 skills at any given time. So once you like upgrade and maybe do mastery on them if you want to switch them around, there's not really there's no incentive to further spend more ability points, and even then you can fully refund those ability points and then just like reallocate them if you're trying to go for a new build. But other than that, it's like I'm just kind of sitting on like a mountain of resources, and like it's just like a lot of the economy in the game is just like kind of not interesting for me.
So Colin wanted to get a word in, and then we'll go over to Chow.
Oh yeah. I look at something like Final Fantasy 15 as a game that is too like split between action game and RPG. I'd kind of consider it like a 50-50 split where it really just seems super confused. So for me, I think, and I will agree, a lot of like the RPG stuff is not the most interesting thing ever, but I like in my mind, I picture it as kind of like an 80-20 split where it's like 80% an action game and 20% of an RPG. And that's enough of an action game for me to still like really get into it and not
I still have
find
a lot of I still have a lot of fun with the battle system, like the general flow of battle, like
yeah,
they make no mistake that like it's not like
for sure, yeah.
Just because I have like complaints about it, like the way things are, doesn't mean I'm not enjoying it.
No, yeah, me too. it's just the RPG stuff is not bad enough to get in my way of I don't think it's detrimental. I do wish it was fleshed out more, but I still think this is an RPG. I still kind of enjoy the RPG elements that exist. I don't find them too intrusive, but there are a couple things I look at this game and I'm like, okay, this could definitely be better. Even as one of this game's strongest soldiers, I can admit, like, the quests, for example, I adore the writing in all the quests, and I definitely think the best quest writing and the best quests are in that, like, after that time skip. But you could maybe have made these a bit better.
Like the thing about it like this, like I'm thinking about it like this, like I wish there were more incentives to like just spend resources. Like for example, if they have
absolutely,
like for ability points, if you could like spend those ability points to like reduce cooldowns and up the damage on like individual skills, like a meter.
That'd be great.
That'd be awesome, because it feels like, okay, I'm actually making interesting decisions based on like resources that I have, and they're like now instead of just like kind of unlocking the node and not really doing anything else after upgrading and mastering. So it's just one of those things that I contend with in this game that like I did like it's so close to like really getting there and like realizing its full potential, but it just doesn't take that extra step.
And I agree with Cullen, where like I wish I had more to spend my gil on, and I wish I could go to the blacksmith and have a whole bunch of different weapons and have to choose between them. The fact that I don't really have that isn't like on a knock against the game. It just doesn't elevate it. I just think the game could be really, really something special and neat, both in the RPG space and in the action space, if it had some more of that. But the absence of it is just kind of like, oh, I wish it had that, and that's kind of it. Like without it, I'm still enjoying what is present.
What's really interesting, and I haven't played too much of it to like fully speak on it, is that it seems like New Game Plus, the Final Fantasy mode difficulty, actually has much more gear. It requires like much more, like you have to spend your gil on a lot more, like, because by the end of the game I think I had like 400,000 gil and I just wasn't really spending it. But New Game Plus seems like it has a bunch of new equipment you can buy. There's new enemies, there are new materials you get from side quests, and it's like, okay,
I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So that sounds hopefully.
It's like I am looking forward to my New Game Plus run.
I kind of wish that was the game that we got on New Game.
That's the same thing I was thinking of. I feel the main game is just like too easy, or maybe we just got spoiled by like Souls games for being like too difficult for this standard.
No.
And what's considered normal is not really normal anymore, I guess.
Also like there's like no like actual like difficulty until like New Game Plus, because it's like, oh, it asks, oh, do you want to be story focused or action focused? That doesn't change anything. It just automatically equips some of those helper accessories at the very start if you choose story focused.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
So I haven't played a lot of action games. I've played Metal Gear Rising like 12 years ago, and I wasn't good at it. I never really learned how to parry. So I wasn't worried about this game in terms of being too hard or difficult, because usually I can manage, and I've played like Souls-likes and things like that. But I see, some people on our own Discord have been posting like combo videos and hitting really high stagger numbers. I'm like, man, I can never do that. So I did struggle a little bit early on before I had a lot of icon switches, like with the Garuda fight is one of like the first major boss fights. I did actually lose. But the thing is you just respawn like partway through the fight with a full allotment of potions again. I'm like, oh, now I'm fine, because I'm literally like at like the checkpoints are super generous. And then past that fight, once I had like more options, like for instance, one of the later skills on the Phoenix kit heals you. Like, oh, there, now I don't really need to worry about resource management of my potions anymore, because I can just use that to heal myself. So like I had a tiny bit of a curve at the start getting used to it, but past that point I'm like, yep, I'm fine. This isn't too bad.
I do think the game has a couple spikes, and I think the general discussion on difficulty, it kind of overlooks the fact that a lot of the players of this game are not going to be action game enthusiasts.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people playing this game are not going to be the DMC heads or the big action game fans. And even as one of those, there were fights in this game where I was struggling a little bit. Like, this game, when it needs to be hard, is pretty challenging. But as someone who is generally a really big fan of action games, I'm left conflicted on how they did the New Game Plus, because on one hand, wow, I love actual substantial New Game Plus content. I love a reason to go back I love like an actual like because they remix like all of the missions too, where they add new enemies in, and all the levels have kind of been raised to around the 40s right from the get go, and your level cap is just increased from where it was on your main game. And I love that kind of stuff. But also, I look at all this and I'm like, I feel like maybe this could have been in the main game, and it would have offered more variety. And then instead, we could have just had a harder difficulty mode from the get go. And
You know,
I
you know
think
who's
that
going to
might
win
have
all
helped.
this? You know who's going to win this?
Who?
When the game comes to PC and Adam is playing for the first time, they'll be like, unlock Final Fantasy mode from the start.
That's true.
And Adam will be
That's
like,
true.
hell yeah.
We're stupid. We're the ones stupid.
Well, the Final Fantasy mode is like, it does expect you to be like level 40, 45, 48. It's that the same thing that 7 Remake did, where the hard mode is expected to be a continuation of the main game.
Right.
And you'll either love it or hate it. Because
this is a bit of a tangent. Well, it's not really a tangent, but I adored Final Fantasy VII Remake's hard mode. It was one of my favorite gaming experiences of the last like 5 years.
They don't limit you on healing in this one like that one did, but I do think you'll probably have a lot of fun with New Game Plus. I was watching, I think they did a stream or a unique like IGN first, where they just went over a couple of the missions and showed like what differences there are. And they'll just drop in unique, like I think they put in a chimera on, I forget the mission. Maybe someone will be able to remind me of what it was called. But that little forest mission with when you're like running through with Sid early on in the game, you just fight a chimera like right in where a normal like maybe mini boss like would be. They just put a hunt right in there in a small enclosed area, and it's like, yeah, now you got to figure out how to deal with this in a much like, because typically when you fight the chimera, you're in a big field because it's a hunt and you're going out and you're like finding it in the world. But just fighting those kind of enemies in the main campaign during those missions is a really fun way to remix that. And it's like, yeah, that is great. But also, maybe some of this could have been dispersed better.
Yeah, I'm kind of of two minds about that, like you are. Like, I love having really neat New Game Plus modes, but then when you see it as something that is lacking in the New Game mode, you're like, man.
It's one of those things. Like, I only want to replay this game in New Game that Final Fantasy mode once it's like more performance patches.
Oh yeah.
I've been playing on performance mode on PS5, and even with the variable frame rate, it's like, man, this thing it's rarely ever stable 60, man.
I ended up switching to quality mode just because, especially when I saw that you were having dips to like the mid 30 FPS on performance mode. It's like, if I'm going to have that, I might as well just have it be like a steady 30 and have it look better the whole time. Like, my ideal like mode, I'm not sure if they'll ever do it, I wish they would, is if it was 30 FPS outside of combat, and then as soon as you got into combat, it did because in combat, it's always like 60 FPS because they like drop the resolution down a bunch. But I feel like it would be nice if there was an option to have like when you're just moving around, be 30 FPS, because it's not like it's really going to impact the gameplay that much, but it looks better. And then as soon as you got into combat, I don't know.
I wouldn't really tweak the settings much, but I was wondering, it's like, is there a way to get rid of the motion blur?
Not yet. They said they're gonna address it in a patch.
Yeah, so we have to we get cooked again, Shao. We have to wait for a post-launch patch for that.
I had a realization while talking to James and Alex about this as we played, and then especially learning about some of the actual like what's going on under the hood of this from Digital Foundry. And it's that my eyes are terrible because I was playing through performance mode and I was like, this is the best looking game I've ever played. I don't notice any difference from quality mode. This is amazing. And then I heard about all that and I saw that and I was like, I am wearing my glasses on my nice 4K TV in my living room and I didn't notice any of this. I need a new prescription.
I need new glasses too. It's like,
I am in the same boat. I got glasses recently, and I thought, man, this is like the greatest looking game of my life. What the fuck are people smoking about?
Yeah, it's like I noticed a bit more because I tried to like play it on my computer through my capture card, and then I was able to see like some of the frame dips a bit more and notice a couple things. But I was consistently throughout performance mode, just like this is a looker.
Yeah.
I will take whatever frame rate drops are necessary to ensure battles are 60 FPS, because that's the part that like really matters to me. But I also agree with James where it would be nice if you could have that more like quality mode at any point you're not in a battle.
Yeah, and to be clear, Colin, like I play my PS5 at my desk on a 4K monitor, so that's probably why I've been able to notice.
Oh yeah.
So normally I do that as well, but this game I took it and actually put it on my TV. I very rarely actually play games on my TV. If it's a console game, I normally do what you mentioned and play it through a capture card on my monitor because that way I can pull up plugging the RPG site guides for all the hunts and quests, but also like Discord and all that. And it just fits my style a bit more. But this, I actually took my PS5 and hooked up on the TV so I could enjoy this at 70 inches. And this game, I remember when it was very first shown off, that people thought like the color palette was too muted. It didn't look that great. And if I remember right, Yoshida or someone on the development staff said like, we want to make sure when the next time we show this game that it's really polished up. We want to make sure it's impressive. And they nailed it. I think this is one of the best looking RPGs I've ever played. There's a silly little subset of I don't know, social media dialogue about how this game's not on Xbox, right? So the fact that Final Fantasy 15 was on Xbox, there's been some weird subset of people saying like, well, Final Fantasy 15 looked nearly as good as Final Fantasy 16. It doesn't look that good. I'm like, like Final Fantasy 15 looked great, I thought, but this game also looks great. It looks 5 years newer and on better hardware. Like this game, I think I have no complaints about the visuals at all. Performance, yeah, it's not rock solid, but visuals, I've really enjoyed my time with this. Just walking through all the towns, I really just love the fantasy vibe that this game has in terms of styling. I think the color palette that it has is maybe a little bit more muted, but I think it really fits the world building.
I think the one criticism I have is like it looks great, like visual fidelity wise, it looks great, but I think I don't know if it's probably a problem with my eyes, but I really struggle a lot of the low light situations in this game, especially like early on, like where a lot of
it's
the
not
game
just you.
is
Oh
like
yeah,
in the
not
dark.
at all. I
Like,
had the same problem.
I had to constantly go to press L3 to know where to go next. Like, hey, Torgo, I need you to fucking tell me where to go next because I cannot see shit.
So
I
normally,
will
apparently
say
all have
that,
ideas on this one. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I will say that once you get to the second time skip, I feel like you don't have to worry about running into those situations for the rest of the game. But I do know that I had the brightness slider up a bit higher than it was supposed to be until like the second time skip, because like early on, especially, there was some sections where it's like, I can't see shit. And this
There's still parts there. Yeah, there's still parts that during the second time skip. Like to clarify where I'm at, the most recent icon that I got was Bahamut. So like I'm
shit, you've been
man, you've been
Yeah,
farming.
you're far. Wow.
Yeah, so I'm way in there right now.
I also have Bahamut. We have no life this.
Yeah, I already know what happens there.
Can I just vaguely just cut in super quick to say that is one of the coolest segments I think I have ever played in a game.
That was okay. Yeah, the icon fights are so fucking anime. Like, okay, like my main criticism for icon fights is like they play out. It feels like it's more like a cutscene playing out than you actually playing it. But like what you're actually seeing on screen, it's like there's gonna sound terrible, but I mean it earnestly. Like the icon fights are like Asura's Wrath, but with less gameplay and like kind of
get it.
And like with less interesting QTEs. But what's actually being shown to you is like really fucking over. It's like this is insane.
It is incredibly obvious. It is incredibly obvious that so we know that Platinum Games contributed to this. Incredibly fucking obvious, they did the icon battles. It just has their handiwork all fucking over it. Speaking of the cutscenes though, holy shit. Like you were talking about the visuals and how like great this game looks, but the cutscenes, oh my god, like I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say I legitimately don't think you can get much better than the visuals in those cutscenes.
The cutscene choreography and like the general like compositions of the shots are like it's really magnificent in this game.
I remember Adam
Yeah.
brought up like one thing that Final Fantasy VII Remake. It doesn't do this all the time. It has some good moments, but it has a lot of the stand in a circle and talk moments. And this game has that a little bit with like the side quests. But during like most of the narrative quests, the in-engine cutscenes, probably like 2/3 of them, they're like, you've got interesting camera angles, you've got like depth of field effects that don't feel too overdone. There was like a moment where it was just Jill and Clive speaking in like the second floor of a some sort of tavern, and Jill just like leans up back against a table, and just it's a very subtle thing, but just like stuff like that where they just actually occupy the space that they're in. They're not just plop the model here, have them stand and do their, general emote. I've really enjoyed the cutscene choreography here.
There's a number of things in cutscenes that I saw and it just made me go, holy shit. First off, there was one scene, it was a very quick thing, where there was a shot of Jill. She put her gloved hand on a table and then gripped her fingers, and you could see the fabric of the glove shifting with that.
Yeah. Yeah. That like the clothing is fucking insane in this game.
The second thing is in the scene where one of the characters has to, like, being vague as possible, has to get jailbroken, and another character like grabs and throws their weapon to you, and it's all in like one single shot. Like in a lot of other games, they would hide it, but it's like they literally picked up the sword, threw it at them, it got caught, and then it's like, holy shit.
And because it's all an engine, it's the sword you have equipped.
Yeah. It's like
I wanted to like circle back to something Brian said that was like, oh yeah, Final Fantasy 15 looks way better than this, and flat out no, you're wrong. The in-engine cutscenes. Oh, and I didn't say that Brian said this, but like kind of, you know what I mean. But like the in-engine cutscenes for this game, like 15 had to do pre-renders to get even close to it. I am continuously blown away at how immaculate these cutscenes look and how the models look. And I did have that bit of a moment where I was like, is this the first next gen RPG I've played?
Yeah.
Is this really like
finally a PS5 exclusive?
Yeah. And to be clear, if in a perfect world, this game would have released for Xbox, PC, and PS5 all at the same time. Like, I'm not defending that it's a PS5 exclusive at all.
Yeah, but you can tell like it was made from the ground up for a next gen game. It's not a cross gen game at the conception. It was like, oh, this is you get like
that's a funny thing. It was a cross gen game at conception.
Was it?
Yeah, They confirmed that they originally were developing this for both PlayStation 4 and 5.
Oh wow, they really messed it up really well.
I'm glad they axed that. Oh my god.
Yeah, I think I think we're going to like cutscenes and character animation stuff like that. I'm thinking on my two favorite characters in this game. I never thought I never would have expected this going in, but like my two favorite characters in this game are Byron and Gav. And
I fucking love Gav.
A lot of that is because of like their body language and the way they express themselves in cutscenes.
Gav is the best character, okay? And Byron's actually good too. I'm kind of sad that his voice actor passed away, so they have a different guy. Yeah, apparently his voice actor passed away, so there's two
English or Japanese.
His English one.
Okay. Wow.
So
really?
Yeah, his English voice actor passed away, so they got two different guys voicing him. So I'm not sure where the voice changes are. Maybe like there's some scenes that they added
the fuck?
for him.
That's
but
crazy.
yeah, I love his introduction. That one part when it's like, "Who are you, Clive?" Like, or when Clive shows up and he doesn't know who the hell he is, and Clive did this thing that's kind of cringy. Like he basically pulled like a grade 8 syndrome or whatever to show how that it's him, right? And it's like that scene was very lovely.
It's not Trinibia, but it's definitely like it looks corny from an outsider's perspective, but it's one of those like, oh, you can totally, that's a very in-family type of thing that you would kind of use to like identify yourself almost.
It added a really like it was a very sweet moment that added a lot of like texture to the game's story. I feel it was such a very specific thing that I adore in like RPG narratives when they have that attention to detail. It's like, because how else would he like prove himself?
Yeah, and I like how IDs back in the day, right? So
and I like how it was something that wasn't like shown to the player. It's like an implied history. Like, okay, we weren't there to see Clive act in whatever play he was like reenacting, but clearly it was something that he and his uncle Byron had, bonded over
Yeah,
it.
yeah, there's like no full flashback sequence for it, like
Yeah.
or anything, which I appreciate. It's like, okay, you were able to like keep the focus of this cutscene and like the emotional tension, like ease, while not resorting to a flashback for it.
Yeah,
which
and
is
whenever
something I
games,
admire.
and treat us as intelligent people and allow us to glean like, oh, this was something that was really important to them 13 years ago, rather than being like, all right, here's your sepia tone flashback to explain how things happened. Like, no, you can glean the important information in the moment here. We don't need to provide you that.
And I feel like 16's really good at doing that.
Mhm.
There are
Just an aside, I hope somebody at Falcon plays this game and gets inspired by the cutscenes.
You're not wrong.
like I adore like all of this game's cast. They're some of my favorite Final Fantasy characters I think I've ever had the pleasure of sitting through. And
Yeah,
I'm no just and yeah, a lot of that is because the writers do kind of respect the audience. And I know like it was like kind of made fun of in some article, I forget what it was called, that active time lore thing, but
I love it. It's so appreciated.
It is, because then they can have like they can imply things or not directly talk about certain aspects of the game's lore and not bog down the pacing with exposition. Like the important things they do like exposit, but
yeah, they find the really good middle ground, because I was worried potentially that you'd run into the Final Fantasy 13 Codex issue where that game makes no sense unless you encyclopedically like scour the codex. Where this game, it has it there for those that want to read, not only the active time lore, but the whole the library, Harpo crates. There is a ton to dig into if you want to. But the game itself, it provides all the information you need in the cutscenes without being too over expository. And also it avoids the at least in the English dub, it avoids the dub grunting. So I remember Final Fantasy VII Remake got a little bit of post-launch guff for the grunting. And here, whenever they have like an exhalation or something like that, it's usually something that's very deliberate and meaningful. And I have no qualms with the dub work really whatsoever.
I'll say this, like, as someone that has talked with Ben Starr in person, he does an insane job as Clive because it doesn't sound like his normal voice. His range in this game is just insane.
Yeah,
Clive in general, like that's my dude right there.
I love
Clive.
He's very good.
He did like a very good job to a point. You know, it's like you could easily tell this is young Clive. This is middle-aged Clive or whatever you want to call him. Right?
I just love that he's so much of a badass and he's like very competent and confident with what he does. Yeah, like,
and also he has this like quiet, softer side to him.
Yeah,
I feel like he feels like a person, whereas I think often Final Fantasy can make its protagonists more like archetypes.
I agree with you. Like I was having this conversation with a friend just last night when we were talking about like comparing like protagonists, like say like Clive to like something like Noctis, you know, like Noctis was like a fun character to see, but like he's not really interesting outside of like he doesn't feel like he actually has a character outside of like his love for fishing, you know, and but other than that, like Clive kind of goes through the motions until like he comes into his own at the very end of it, but but his journey there, it feels like he's like stumbling from one plot beat to another in it. And while like the characterization of Clive in 16 is like very well realized, like from like his early up until like his more troubled first time skip, where like the circumstances that he finds himself in, and then eventually like finding like what his purpose is, on like what his goals are, and what are the connecting the dots to like the motivations of what led him to go on this path, eventually this ultimate goal.
So I'm not sure exactly how they managed it, but they managed to make Clive a very, very competent person without going into Gary Stu territory. And I'm not exactly sure what it is that allows him to do that. He's not arrogant. He's obviously got, like, you learn throughout the course of the story that he has some special characteristics. Mainly, he can use multiple icons. That's not a surprise. But he's still, in his mind, Joshua's shield. first and foremost. Like he is a shield, not a sword. And that might be a little bit like poetic or namby-pamby or whatever you want to call it. But it kind of like suits his character. Like he's super competent, but also like super humble, but in a way that's not obnoxious. So they managed to like thread all those needles at the same time in a way that is quite remarkable.
I think part of that is because like he recognized that he does have flaws, and he recognizes that he can't save every single person around him. Like even though he's fighting for his own justice and the justice for people around him, eventually he realizes like when he gets to like say a town that's like being destroyed and there's like people dying left and right in it, he understands that like he can't stop that. He can't. He's not like an all powerful being to like protect every single person from the incoming assault that he came to late. You know. It's one of those things like, okay, well, I'm here for a specific purpose to kind of like, you know, like I have a specific objective in this. I have to get there. I can't go out of my way to like try and save every single person and like and cry about it if I can't do that.
It does feel like another JRPG protagonist would either be like whining about it or they dwell on it for too long.
He doesn't dwell on it at all.
he regrets it. He says like, I wish I was here, but I can't control that. I can only, you know, and then he moves on.
I don't know about you, but I don't know. Clive kind of reminds me of Kiryu from the Yakuza series. I don't know.
A tiny bit, yeah.
It's like, I don't know. I find his interaction with Jill is kind of like awkward and kind of like innocent, I guess. I really like the relationship between the two, you know?
Oh yeah, they're like that is a very in like this is pretty obvious that they're meant to be a romantic pairing, but like the romance between them is very well done, I think.
They don't have any like awkward moments or melodrama or hijinks. They just let it be. And they have a lot of shared screen time. I'm actually surprised just generally how much screen time Jill gets, which I appreciate. And then also just the cast of characters in general. Like not only do you get a lot of screen time with characters like Byron and Gav, but like there's a lot of characters that are like supporting cast, like Helen
Aaron.
and Martha and Wade.
Otto's Otto's my dude. I love Otto.
And like I'm always kind of surprised when like you see a character and you think they're one off like Martha, and then you kind of go back to her area like several times, and she's not that important a character, and I'm saying that like carefully, but she serves a purpose that is a little bit more low key but also necessary, and not just her but a lot of the supporting cast, where it doesn't just feel like here are the 5 major characters. These are the only 5 people that ever matter. Everyone else is an extra in the background. Like, no, there are people that all up and down in terms of scale of like ability or power or capability or whatever.
I think what really is surprising is like how involved like even some, like the lore masters like Hippocrates and Vivian. I love Vivian. Like how involved they are with like actually interacting with the characters and the plot beats and side quests. Like they're very involved even like in the main narrative and plotting on what to do next, or like for clarification on like a certain thing. Like I think that really threw me out, because usually those characters that are like lore dumps are kind of just thrown to the side. It's like, okay, this NPC is here, like if you want to learn more. But no, they're actually involved in the story and interact with characters regularly. And it's something I really appreciate. And also something I really appreciate about Vivian is like the whole visual like timeline visualization of like the character chart over time, and like the world map, and like the war table over time. How like you get a better sense of the world, the scale of the world, and like the movements of the world by on the way they like visualize that, presented you through a timeline.
And one of the reasons why I adore the side quest so much is that I like, if you really love these characters, which I do, and it will give you so much more time with them, because all of these side characters have their own quest lines that you can go through, and it really feels like you're building a community. Is one of the things I touched upon in my review, where you are helping these people you do care about, and if you want to get more of them, you do have to put in that effort. And by doing that, you're rewarded with even better like characterization, even more character moments. But if you don't want to, you don't have to.
Yeah, like, I think the side like a good chunk of the side quests are pretty interesting in those in terms of like those NPC storylines of like characters that like you're more familiar with. But like the actions sometimes do feel repetitive and monotonous. Like they'll be like, oh, here's another bandit, you know. Bandits are like making trouble again. You gotta go there and do this. Oh, there's another. I gotta get this Curl's ass, so like you know, the shit thing, and then Gotta get that. Like the actual like motions of what you're doing isn't all that interesting, but some of them, like I do appreciate that they give those like minor characters a lot more. They expand upon them in a pretty significant manner. Like one example is like I just did like the final like Goots one, and it really exemplifies like what he like his relationship with Karen. And I thought
Karen's
like,
great. I love her.
yeah, I don't really like care for Goots all that much, but I appreciated that like they went through that effort, like expanding that relationship with Karen and Goots.
Damn, everyone just treated him as the Hordor of this game. As soon as it came out, it's like, oh, that's Hordor. It's like, okay.
So, Cullen,
Hmm?
what did you think of the Titan fight?
It was one of the best action game boss set pieces I've ever done in a game. It's like an hour long.
I thought my
Adding,
space was
like-
gonna explode. I was like, can my PS5 like do this?
Like, how many health bars does this person have?
Well, as long as you clean your PS5, it should be okay.
That fight has like 6 unique BGMs just for it, I feel like.
And counting that and the partially primed version of it, it's just like that is some of the best action game content I have ever done. And it is like even the actual like icon fight itself. I think all of the icon fights just land entirely. They are exceptional in like every single regard. I was having an amazing time, and in Titan in particular, oh, it's so good. That was that like moment of like this is one of the coolest games I've ever played in my life.
So
The Titans are very spectacle, and I do appreciate the like I appreciate that I got to see that like in my life. I like almost like I didn't think like I'm a big fan of like FF summons, right? And like seeing them go super over the top of this game with like crazy visuals. Like I'm just like, oh, thank you for making this. Like it might have not been the most interactive thing like I played necessarily, but like the spectacle of it all is really funny and really exciting to see. I'd always put a smile on my face when Clive as Ifrit screams "fuck" during it. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I was
awesome.
about to
If Ifrit is so cool, I was always an Ifrit.
I was gonna
like-
say, which one would you think it's better, the Bahamut fight or the Titan fight?
Bahamut.
I think the Bahamut fight
Bahamut.
was a better story weight to it, the way that plays out. Now I'm kind of into like I do enjoy the icon fights for the spectacle. Sometimes I feel like the gameplay gets a little bit long in the
Yeah.
tooth, but that's a minor nitpick. I'm not sitting there like hating life as I go through it. I'm just like, all right, I got the spectacle.
I just kind of wish that, like, once again, I wish there was more customizability of like Ifrit themselves. Like, I wish like you do unlock skills for Ifrit eventually at narrative points during these icon fights, but like it's all railroaded, right? You're not actually like making like interesting customizable decisions of like how you outfit Ifrit, let's say.
Alternatively, my perspective on that is I am very happy that at those moments they throw out all the stats, and so none of that matters because it becomes entirely on skill and just going through it, and they're able to design the fight in a particular way where you will not have a like advantage by like equipping or changing things up like that. And I think in those moments when like I think they commented that they wanted to make these like wrestling matches, and in those actual like gameplay segments, not the special QTE moments, I think these fights land especially hard because it is just like, okay, you've got your Ifrit at a preset like thing here, and then the enemy is this, and it's just do it.
Have you got to an icon battle during New Game Plus? Like, is there any difference?
I have
from
not
that?
yet. No, I did not have time to go through much of New Game Plus.
I was just wondering, like, what would they do in New Game Plus? Would they just make it like all the bosses like a bigger HP sponges? I don't think that would do anything. It's like
my
I'm
guess is
curious
that'll
what they
be
do.
about the same, but they're changing so
maybe
many
new
other things
moves.
that who knows.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
might give them new moves, but I yet to be confirmed.
The one thing that really it was funny like the first 3 or 4 times, and now it's just like, dude, this is ridiculous. Like how many seal obtained moments you get as you're
Oh.
just traveling around, because like whenever you go to like a new town, there's like they generally just follow a generic structure of like there's a dispute or there's a conflict in this local town, and there's something in your way, and you need to solve this dispute in town to continue forward. And you go through like these information networks of the NPCs that you get there, and like they really use this narrative plot. They use a narrative device repeatedly in these exactly, Chow. He put up the fucking Gary showing all his gym badges picture on it, and yeah, then like in each of these towns they have like once you earn their trust, they're like, oh, like if you display this seal, people will know that like you're on our side or like you're representing us, and they do this a lot for the fucking.
I was actually going to ask,
game.
is this like a carryover from like Final Fantasy XIV or something? Because
No.
it was so like explicit and so repeated, where I was just like, can't they like just change it up, just have the same like flow in terms of how the story progresses, but just explain it away, not just you're holding your box of seals or your bag of seals, and you've got like the chocobo from Sid, and you've got like in one of the later towns you literally get 2 different seals from 2 related characters, and then they like merge together to make the merge seal. And these seals are just key items. They don't even like show up. They show up in the same menu as your resources. They don't even show up as a key item. They show up as like the treasure chest item. I forget what that is.
Yeah, every town you go to, it'll be like, oh my god, you had the seal from the Dame. Oh my god! It's like, tell them I'm a good person. I don't want to.
It's like another reminder because it's such a stupid fucking narrative like device that's like used a lot throughout the game just to like keep the story moving forward. It's like they use this crunch so
why
much.
They do it, but like because it explains like why you have to spend time in an area before passing through like a threshold, like a physical gate.
Yeah, I don't mind that, like the local dispute part, but like
I figure they could just doctor it up in a slightly different way. Like at one point, let's say you're actually helping the person who's blocking you off, and then they say, "All right, now I'll let you through because you've helped me out," or they provide some other little side quest that allows you to go around the gate or something. There's just different ways they could have done it, but it doesn't. The presence of it, the way they have done it, doesn't detract from the game. I just feel like it's something they could have done better, similar to like the conversation earlier about the guild and the resources and things like that.
Yeah, it's just really goofy and funny. Yeah, I mean, overall though, like my overall impressions of the game so far, and I'll probably, hopefully I'll finish it up very soon. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot more than 15. Because I've only ever played 15 like at its launch. I never went through all the post date stuff like that. So my impression of the game is like very early on, like the release date of that game.
I'm in the boat that I despise 15, and it's like one of the worst FF game I ever played. I don't know what the hell it tries to be.
I think there's like interesting parts about it, but it's very patchwork, right? I'm thinking of like the last Final Fantasy game, like I really, really, really enjoyed before 16 because I'm just having like a blast with the game, even with all of its faults. Like,
I actually like 13 to a certain extent, except for the story. I actually do like the gameplay. I know people complain it was a little bit too linear, but I didn't really care about like dungeon exploring because there's really like no reward for exploring too much. Even like in 16, it was like, what is your reward from trying to explore the entire map?
Yeah, you're right. Like there's very little like reward to like exploring the world because I didn't bother after a certain point with 16. Like I'm just going from like straight, like if I have a quest there, if I need to do something, I'll just go from point A to point B. And it's also weird because like the narrative like beats that you go through is like they're like stored in like after you go through them, it's stored in an arcade mode as well, so you can replay them. But it really highlights like the structural faults with them, I guess, where you're kind of just going in a straight line. Like as soon as you enter them, you start from a zone and you pretty much go in a straight line to the boss fight. There'll be little flourishes like of like a town, like you have to go through a town, but you just have to go in a straight line from point A to point B, in those narrative zones. So like I think it's one of those weird things once again where like it doesn't know whether it wants to be like an action game, an RPG, and then that's all like further exemplified by like after you go through them, you can like play through it again like as an arcade mode and like rack up points, like sort of like how you would go through like a DMC stage, So it's like it's really weird. It's one of those.
Yeah.
It's one of it's like one of the few parts in 16 where it's having an identity crisis about like what it wants to be.
I guess I never really thought of that. There's really not a whole lot of incentive if you're on a map to be like, I want to see what's over there. Because if you don't have a red icon for a story or a green icon for a side quest, you might find a chest that you can kick open, but 90% of the time it's just going to be like
cool.
you're gonna get sharp fangs, and you're gonna be like, oh, I already have 900 of these or whatever.
There's only like maybe 2 treasure chests in the entire game that had like a weapon upgrade at that time. And that's it.
I will say there have been a few times where I like actually had like, oh, I can craft this weapon, then I can upgrade it. I can actually spend some of my resources. Hooray. And then like in the next story mission, you're like, here's a new weapon that you get from beating the icon. Like it's better than anything you have so far. I'm like, oh,
like some of these like weapon upgrades are like so incremental, right? Like I got like a new like icon weapon. It's like +2 to what you have. It's like cool, I guess. Like I mean, it is better, but the number does go up. But it just feels unrewarding sometimes during those like power gap thresholds.
It does feel a bit like we're like, oh, this belt will increase my defense by 5 from 270 to 275 or something like that. Where it's like, oh yeah, it's a 2% increase. Woo.
Yeah.
Did we want to do any section about going into? I think we've done a really good job so far keeping this as spoiler free, spoiler light as possible. I don't know if we wanted to go into any of the like early game, past the prologue, past the time skip spoiler.
I guess I'm interested. Like what were the moments, or what was the moment? Like, was there like an early game defining moment for you that's like, oh, this game is special, or is this game not for me? Like,
I think the moment that clicks for that is
wait before you go, are we going to go into spoilers right here just so I can time
early game?
I don't think it'll be too much spoilers.
I'm talking about early game.
Gotcha.
I think my moment click on the game already was the Phoenix and Ifrit fight during the demo. That already seals the deal with that epic soundtrack when they're both fighting, right? The other thing that seals the deal for me is when Clive fights himself in pretty much a very early part of the game. I think that part seals the deal.
The Ifrit fight is like the moment where I was like, yeah, no, this is like one of the coolest games ever.
Yeah, the Ifrit fight is really it's something. It's one of those early stage fights. Like, this is really goofy and funny, but really impactful as well. I'm trying to think for me. I mean, there's a lot of little moments. I'm trying to think of like the moment where I was like I don't know about this game until. How about you, James? While I'm thinking.
I kind of talked about this when I did the preview, I guess. So.
Yeah, but remind people who didn't read the preview.
Well, it's just I don't know. I've talked about this game so much, and it's like I'm happy with just being more positive about it today.
Okay.
For me, it was the probably one of the very first like major story segments after the initial time skip. This isn't a surprise. Is Benedicta and the Garuda. One of the first major bosses that you fight is Garuda. Just that sequence, because at that point it's basically 3 major players. It's Clive, it's Cid, and it's Benedicta, and they're each dominance. Even though Clive is still kind of coming into his own at that point, and just the way that progresses from establishing Benedicta as an antagonist, how she's related to like the world at large, and specifically like Hugo and his country, going into that fight, how Cid is, generically speaking, kind of put aside, leaving it to Clive having to fight her on the roof of that castle, and then the way that it incorporates Torgal being injured and then coming back to save you and things like that. Just that whole sequence that was kind of like the very first. It's kind of like the very first like arc of the game. If this was like a manga or an anime, that'd be like the first arc. Kind of really sold me. The prologue did as well, but the fact that was kind of divorced from the larger setting of the game. It was kind of self-contained within Rosalith. Didn't quite sell it as much to me. But after going through the first arc there, I was like, yeah, I'm enjoying this a lot from a narrative perspective.
I think for me, I'm thinking. I think what really got me really interested in the game was something that Chow mentioned earlier, where there's like a pair of side quests after you meet the dame, and you're going to this coastal village to figure out some stuff. But there's side quests you get. There's 2 side quests, but there's one specific side quest that I won't spoil what happens in it. But you talk to this little girl. She's trying to find her pet, and then what happens in that quest, and really for me established the tone of this game in a really surprising way, because I think that really that one quest did a lot to kind of set the stage of how this world operates in the way that how social classes are divided, and not just not just a clear cut slave versus master type deal, but in terms of the influence of this social class idealism, like how early is it taught to a person, let's say. So that was an interesting side quest that made me go, man, I really hope they start if they lean into this, how will that affect the narrative beats of this game? And I think they do a pretty decent job on leaning into that concept in the bigger picture of the main story at that part of the game.
I think that kind of goes back into what Colin was saying. It's yeah, most of the side quests, mechanically speaking, are not that interesting in terms of what you actually do. And maybe about a third of them are also not that interesting in terms of what you learn or what you experience. But a good half of the remaining 2/3 do elaborate on some characters that you've met, or introduce a little wider segment of the world, or just kind of give you an excuse to go to a place what is the name of the town that's right before you go into the Imperial area? It's called Northfield or Northland or something like that. And Northridge, yeah. And you don't need to spend a lot of time there. And then also Eastpool. You don't spend a lot of time there because of the events that happen there. So just these side quests, even though they're not mechanically that interesting, admittedly, it just kind of gives you an excuse just to kind of spend more time and remember oh, that's what Eastpool is, or that's what Lost Northridge is, or that's Lost what's Lost? I'm blanking on the name. The
Lost Wing.
Yeah, and who those people are. And the quest with Quentin and Lost Wing actually has some pretty big gravitas as well as what he's experienced and how that place came to be. So I'm not going to say that all the side quests have immaculate, great, earth-shattering writing, but they do some interesting little just look-ins at the world that is a little bit more normal. You experience it in the confines of the gameplay more directly than going to tomes and just reading about it, or going to Vivian and seeing it on the map.
I guess my last question, for the people here is what's been your general playstyle in terms of your icon kit layout? Have you been mixing and matching a lot of icon skills, or have you been
I think the only kit I don't like is the Garuda kit, in my opinion. I just like the Deadly Embrace, but I don't like the kit itself. Okay, you do way too many hits, and then you just leave yourself vulnerable, so you would have to dodge and cut your combo short. And aerial launch is very situational, so I don't like the other move is where you just you do a big backflip, then do a big swing in front of you. I feel like the Garuda kit is completely trash, and I completely got rid of it once I got Ifrith's ability, Ignition, Will Whiffs, to spam
Ignition
those two and to spam those two, everything's dead.
It took a while for me to warm up to Garuda kit, but the more I used it, the more I liked it. I still can't quite use Rook's Gambit, which is the counter you get. But the Deadly Embrace, the Gouge is my if I just need a press button, deplete stamina meter for an enemy, Gouge is it for me. And then I like the aerial, how it just meshes well with kind of stringing together aerial combat and aerial combos.
And the greatest thing about the combat system though is that it's because I was in a similar thing where it's I really love Deadly Embrace because I need my narrow grab, but I don't like the rest of these. Oh, I can just slap on Rima abilities on here, or Bahamut abilities, because I like this, but I don't really want the actual abilities itself.
You just want the feet of the icon, the circle ability.
Yeah, and with Rama, I like the shot lock, but it's not my ideal. But I love Rama's abilities, and you can just mix and match. And I ended up doing a lot of that by the end of the game.
So in our Discord, in our thread for Final Fantasy, someone did a combo where they did a really high stagger amount using a lot of Rama abilities. I'm oh shit, maybe I should look at this more, because I kind of looked at him yeah, this is fine, but I won't use it. But his shot lock, it puts down, it's basically a debuff. Whenever this enemy takes damage, they'll take additional damage every time you hit. So they put like Rama's shot lock little electric orbs on an enemy right before they staggered, or right at the start of their stagger, and then went into the rest of their combo. I'm like, oh shit, that's part of the way of getting that number to go really high. And then the judgment bolt that you have to spend a lot of ability points into. I'm like, oh man, I should look into Rama more. I've been using a lot of just Ifrit and Phoenix. I've been trying to change it up. When I got the Bahamut kit, I've been trying to use it, but it seems more of like a range kind of like technique kit. Like there's orbs that you can like fire off, and then you like explode them once they charge up enough damage, as they do like repeated little small hits. But I haven't quite found a way to like implement that into like my play style. So I've been struggling with trying to get the Rama kit to fit.
I feel like the Bahamut kit, it's more like it's made to kill things. It like melt enemies when they're in stagger state when you shoot the giant beam at them.
Yeah, and then the Ifrit kit, or sorry, not the Ifrit kit, the Titan kit. So each kit is basically they're like key ability. They're the O ability that is stuck to that, and then the other abilities that you can eventually master and move off. Just the basic one that you get, that's just like a giant punch with a wind up, just a falcon punch. I forget what it's called. It's called like, I don't know, giant punch. It's not called that, but that one just feels so satisfying to land every single time. So
Oh yeah.
I master that, and I keep it with actually my Garuda kit, because I keep the Garuda kit because I love Deadly Embrace to do the half stagger pull down. But then I just keep the Titan punch just because it feels really good to land.
Okay.
And then ignition is OP because it just like balls up enemies, and then you can just like AoE them down once they're all in
Yeah.
a big giant cluster.
So my main setup against like enemies that have stagger is very Garuda kit focused. Like so like that gauge ability, Chow, I make it safe with Will-O-Wisp. So I combine Will-O-Wisp with gauge, but the combination of those or gouge. My bad. It's G-O-G-A. So I combine Will-O-Wisp and gouge together to make gouge safe, and they both do like a shit ton of stagger. So I pretty much like force 50% like a mini stagger very very fast with that, and then Deadly Embrace, and
That should
then
go die really fast for you then.
yeah, the things die very very fast at this point. So at that point, the last 50% of the stagger for me is I mixed Rama's like post ability, like the big AoE, but it does a lot of stagger as well with Ifrit. And then so I can usually get that and an ignition off before it recovers, and then by that time they're either staggered by this point or very very little stagger at this point, and then I use Titan's abilities on that. But I also use a lot for bigger enemies that have like big sweeping attacks is I use the Titan shield a lot to perfect parry. Because like for me, it's just like Royal Guard from DMC, and I'm very, very used to that kind of play style.
I love that. I love that parry from the shield.
Yeah.
It has like that so much impact when you land it, and that's why I love using it.
Yeah, and it builds up your limit break gauge a lot when you perfect parry as well. So like I incorporate a lot of limit break in my general play style.
I feel like the timing for like regular parry, the one where you clash at the same time as the enemy is hitting you, is a little bit hard to time, and that gives you the witch time. But I still prefer using the Titan parry because the time for doing that's much more easier than the standard parry, in my opinion.
I've been doing a lot of the standard parry a lot more because like it may like once you have a long enough limit break bar, like your opportunities to do that is a lot more frequent because you're firing off attacks so fast that like by the time that like you're trying to fire off an attack towards you, there's a good chance that you'll fire off normal parry during your limit break combo string. So that's like food for thought there, because like you just once you start like noticing that, it's like, oh, this is very exploitable.
Well, I also find like the whole limit break thing is a bit OP. Like you don't even need to worry about potions at that point. It's like you just transform, you get most of your health back by the time that you're probably get hit again, you know. And then it's like, oh, you can also spam that tonic to get back your limit break gauge very fast. You want to like.
I haven't used taunt that much. Does taunt really like charge up limit break that fast?
Well, it helps.
Oh yeah, it's true. But for me, it's just like if I'm not doing damage or stagger damage at any second, then I'm like not. I'm being unproductive.
So we've been going at it for about an hour now, an hour and 10 minutes, and we've kept this pretty much 80 minutes now, basically, entirely like spoiler free. So did we want to just kind of keep any further discussions about the narrative for like a later discussion once we have all kind of beaten the game? We can kind of speak to it openly and just kind of code the whole discussion. Basically, is there any topic that we haven't quite covered yet? I think we've kind of hit pretty much.
I think we hit everything
wide
except for the
Yeah.
music, I guess.
Oh, music, that's a good one.
It's like it's so good.
It's very, very
Like
See,
good.
not much
it-
to really say. It's like Soken is one
you
of
know,
the best.
I know some people say like they don't like, some people don't really like Soken's soundtrack. So I know there's some people are like that, but you know what? I think what Soken really master is the timing of his music. Like I don't know like what's up with it, but like his music plays the chorus at the exact moment that you're probably gonna land a stagger on enemies. It's like the chorus will start to play like around a minute like and a half mark. And that's
I'm also sure that's like, it's part of the programming, the way that like the certain parts of the song like swell up like depending on like the what's happening in the fight. It's not like all entirely timing based. It's not like
I know, like the part where like Clive fights with himself, like it always plays the chorus when you're engaged in a cinematic strike, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like it will be like suddenly like this part of the music played, and also when you're in the cinematic strike, it winds back to that chorus part of it. So,
well, like yeah, I mean, it like the music is definitely the most impactful, like in your face, like during the icon fights. But I really like a lot of the slow, somber tones.
Yeah,
in the
I
game.
like that song. I know Alex is like, oh, it's like I was expecting a more epic battle theme for this or something like that. I'm like, what? It's like no, it's like I actually like those music more. There's a song like that in Final Fantasy XIV where you fight the Midgard Strong. I forgot to say his name though. And you hear like the dragon boss theme, and it's like a very slow playing theme that sounds kind of similar like that. And it's one of my favorite tracks in it. But many people think that highly of it for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it can be hard for people to, like to pick up on like or appreciate like the slower music type of stuff, and I get that, because like compared to like some of like the very, very, very over the top things that happen in this game, it's but Soken really did an amazing job with the soundtrack in this game. It's very impactful and like very effective when it needs to be, even in the slower moments of the game. And it's hard to like talk about it without like mentioning specific story stuff too.
I remember going into when we go to the desert area.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very like typical, like imagine a desert theme and you probably have like something in your mind in terms of like how that's usually like the instrumentation that usually accompanies that. But the one that they implemented here it felt like really appropriate to the place. And I remember just like kind of this sounds a bit cliche, but I just kind of sat there and let the music play for a bit. The other thing that kind of stuck out to me initially, I thought it was a bit negative, but I came to appreciate it, is during the icon fight with Bahamut. It starts out with a lot of like very typical over the top chanting, choir based music. And then it kind of goes into something that's a little bit more classical and subdued, which kind of actually fits like the tone of that fight in terms of like what's going on in the narrative of it. So actually kind of like in the moment, I thought this is kind of an interesting choice, but like, you know what? I appreciate it. It's something quite different. It's not just Gregorian chanting up and down the whole way.
I also appreciated that because like it fits the shot composition, because the fight takes place at nighttime. And like there's like a lot of like very bright lights, due to like the weapon visual effects going on, and like the way that kind of they blend with each other to make up that shot composition during that fight, like really fits with the classical theme of BGM going on during it. And I was like, there's a pretty interesting way to like present this fight in a pretty unique manner that you haven't seen in this game yet.
No, those two are the highlights for me, just entering the desert and then the Bahamut fight. And then, of course, like the Titan fight had a shit ton of like really epic, probably kind of more expected music. It wasn't quite as subversive, but still very fitting all the same. Well, we might just leave it at that for our initial look in at Final Fantasy 16. Now, clearly won't be the last time we talk about it, especially if we're able to get Alex on next week. I know Alex, if you follow his Twitter at all, at AP Zone Runner, he's had a lot of thoughts on this game. Like RPG site was founded basically as a Final Fantasy fan site, so of course this is something that is near and dear to him and near and dear to us as a site. So we're almost certainly, I don't know if it'll be next week or maybe a few weeks out just to space it out a bit, but we will almost certainly revisit Final Fantasy 16 and probably be a little bit more open going into, we'll have a group of people that have all seen the credits. We'll explicitly mark that as a spoiler warning if we go into that. But we'll kind of earmark that for later. But well, while you're here, so thank you so much, Cullen, for all the work that you've done, not only marathoning this game, getting out a review, but also contributing a whole lot to all the other like accompanying features that have gone up on the site in terms of guides, the hunt list, the quest list, and things like that. And then, of course,
Cool.
James as well for the interview that he was able to have at Summer Games Fest with the two voice actors for Clive and for Sid.
I'm glad to be given the opportunity. I don't really like sleeping that much, so it worked out.
So now we're gonna go into Loop 8. Someone forgot. No, I'm just kidding.
Hold on now.
Just
Damn,
leave.
he ditched us.
Well, so
No, he's back.
so we're not
I mean,
gonna.
hold on. Like, how does it feel to go from like Loop 8 to FF16? Like, I don't think many people can like claim to like do that.
It was actually quite nice to go from the feeling of it's so over to we're so back. a bit of whiplash. It's great because I think Lupe will be the worst game I will have played all year long. And it is now specifically because it's going to make me more cautious about the kind of games I want to play this year, and be more wary of any game that looks like it might be something special on a budget.
So we're gonna go into this a little bit later in this podcast, and then of course we've had a lot of new release dates over the last couple of weeks, and we'll go into this a little bit later. But man, September, I hope my family doesn't expect to hear from me, just because there is so much coming out in September, or like the last couple days in August in terms of new releases, and then we're already getting a bunch of games coming up in the October-November timeframe. Just never enough time. So, Cullen, if you want to say, we're going to go into basically the news and the announcement basically from the Nintendo Direct, which probably wasn't the busiest Direct in terms of, we've had some Nintendo Directs that have so many RPG related announcements that were just absolutely swamped. Wasn't quite the case here, but we did have a few surprises, one very big surprise from this. So we're going to go straight into that. Does that sound all right?
I can stay for a little bit. I am going to probably have to head out soon. But I'm totally down to talk Nintendo Direct because it was a pretty fun Direct.
Yeah, so there's basically two key headliners of Nintendo Direct. The one I'm going to open with is the one that was unfortunately leaked, and we kind of preempted the discussion a bit last week, and that is the announcement of Star Ocean, the Second Story R. Now, I do say we preempted this, but we didn't have really any idea what this was. So last week, we kind of reported on the fact that the title and the logo for this game has leaked on a Square Enix support website. And of course, we had a little bit of speculation, like what is the Second Story R? Of course, we drew comparisons to First Departure R and what that was, and the fact that this was marked Second Story and not Second Evolution. What does that mean? Of course, we were, had a few speculative ideas up and down of what this might be, but I don't think anyone quite nailed exactly what it ended up being. It turns out that Star Ocean, the Second Story R, is effectively I put this in air quotes, an HD 2D remake of Star Ocean, the Second Story. It's not quite HD 2D in terms of the way that Square Enix uses it as a marketing term, but it's the same idea of combining high definition environments and art with a 16-bit style graphical stylings for like the sprites and the characters. So because during the Final Fantasy XVI discussion, Adam did not have a chance to participate there, I'm going to go ahead and cue him in here. Hopefully he's listening to tap back over and say, Adam, Star Ocean, the Second Story R, when you saw this, what was your thoughts when this was unveiled and we finally got to see what this game actually was for the first time?
Well, full disclosure, we already knew this was happening, and before the leak even, and I was told it was a remake. I was kind of surprised, like,
you might have known this. I didn't know this.
I shared this in our internal chat that it was more of a remake than a remaster.
Well, I didn't see any images or video. I didn't know what to
There's a lot of inside baseball talk in this podcast.
Those are trade secrets, Brian. You don't leak trade secrets.
Yeah, both Adam and I think we hear from different people about some Square Enix stuff, but we've pretty much come to the conclusion that the people we're hearing from have the same source.
Yeah,
because we keep hearing the same stuff. So.
Just so you know, when you linked the Star Ocean R Steam page, I got linked that at the exact same time from a different direction. I'm like, wait a minute.
Nice.
So like I think this came from the same place ultimately. But anyways, yeah, so we kind of knew it was more or supposedly more of a remake than a remaster, even though people expected it to be more like the First Departure remaster, which that First Departure are, if you're not aware, is basically just the PSP version with new art. That's really what it is. And I reviewed that. I gave it a 6. I think it's an okay game. I've never really been fond of it. I think it's kind of mashy. I don't think the characters are great. I do think the first Star Ocean, or even the PSP version, one thing that's cool about that game that you don't see very frequently in the genre is that there's a total of like, I don't know, 10 different characters you can join that can join your team, or maybe more than that, more like 12. But you can only recruit like half of them, and have, depending on your playthrough and which choices you make, you might have a very different party depending on what choices you make. And that's kind of cool that two different people can play through the game with totally different parties, and you never see that anymore in terms of optional characters, because when a game developer makes a character, they want you to play as them. So I think it's just cool that these games have like, you can either choose character A or character B. And Star Ocean 2 is the same way, in that there are various characters you can get, and there's some that you can get depending on choices you make, kind of an either or situation. This is definitely a remake. It's got this. They're not calling it HD 2D. It's more like I forget what they called it, like
3D 2D.
3D 2D.
Oh yeah,
I think depending on where you looked in like the asset guide or whatever, they're like 3D 2D or 2.5.
What has different terms?
Yeah, I heard
What is it?
2.5D, something like that. Jesus.
But it's basically 2D sprites on a 3D world, which is not what the original was like, or the PSP version. And
my playthrough for the original PlayStation version went through really poorly on Star Ocean 2.
yeah, because you just rejected everyone for some
Yes, I
reason.
did. I rejected everyone. I heard a guide that said, "Is like if you reject this guy, you can get this guy later." But in the end, I didn't read the full guide, so I just rejected everybody.
So you just had Claude and
That's
Reyna.
awesome.
So I was like totally fucked by like near the end of the game. It's like, this is very hard. I'm like, I think my brother's done.
So this game, it looks great. It's I expect it to be structurally the same as Star Ocean 2. And Star Ocean 2 didn't have as dramatic of a difference from PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2, or sorry, PlayStation Portable. And the art is from the artist, I don't have the name in front of me right now, who did Infinite Undiscovery, which is, the artwork itself is really good. And it's a little bit different. It's not an artist we see a lot.
Yukihiro Kajimoto.
Yeah, and it looks really nice. Reyna
Isn't
doesn't
he
look like an
the-
elementary school girl anymore. So
Yeah,
that's good.
the one for Reyna, they really did an amazing job with Reyna.
Yeah, if you're not aware, I'm not gonna say everyone, but a lot of people were kind of disappointed in Reyna's redesign from PlayStation 1 to PSP. They made her look like way younger. Like I said, people joke elementary school. It's just kind of like, this is a little bit weird, but now she looks like a tomboy teenager, like she should. And
Sure, they were trying to capture the look from the anime. Has anyone seen the Star Ocean 2 anime, Star Ocean X?
Yeah,
I didn't know that existed.
yeah.
It's actually pretty okay. It actually covers the first disc, and then you never
But
get a second season.
it only covers the first disc.
Yeah, you never get a second season, so you don't know what happens in the end. So you had to play the game to find out.
I've written about this on the site. One thing I like about the Star Ocean series is, especially the first couple of games, all the weird like mechanical like systems that underlie not necessarily combat, but like the crafting and all the different like personal skill systems that are in the game. And it's the sort of thing where it's like, honestly, it's not balanced at all. You can break these games wide open, and I actually kind of appreciate that. Star Ocean 2 in particular, at around a halfway point in the game, you can get infinite money. And I know some games have infinite money tricks, but it's somewhat involved in how to do it. But my point is that there's all these different like crafting and personal skill systems in the game. If you remember, there's like, you can have characters play like instruments to do different effects, and you can have different crafting, different like skills for each of the different characters to unlock personal skills. This is all common to Star Ocean, and there's some wild things you can do. So I like that aspect of it. Star Ocean 2, like, I think easily has the best story out of any of the games, including 6. best characters. A lot of the side characters are really fun. I like Ashton. He's this guy who seems like he'd be cool because he's got 2 different dragons on his back, but he's actually a really big dweeb. You got Priestess, who's kind of like a robo girl, and a bunch of other characters that are really cool. Sorry? DS is basically your cool swordsman with long flowing hair.
And you cannot get him if you play as Claude. You have to play as Rune to get him.
Yeah, I'm excited about this because like everyone I know that's like ostensibly a Star Ocean fan, like consistently people are like, yeah, Star Ocean 2 is the best one. Like I've seen like a range of opinions where it's like, yeah, there's other games in the series that are good, but Star Ocean 2 is the only one that's really great. I've even said people say that Star Ocean 2 is a game that has carried the franchise through a bunch of turbulence just because people want to see another game like it. So it's like I gotta see it, like if it lives up to that hype.
Some people are a little bit more down on it and say, well, Star Ocean 2 is the only good one. They won't say it's the only great one. They'll say it's the only good one.
Yeah, good, relatively great.
I just said that, so
I think what's really fascinating about this remake is the key staff is not the same as the original, aside from Sakuraba doing the music. Like you have a battle programmer from Star Ocean 3, the first 2 Valkyrie Profile games, like pretty much helming this project as a producer and director. Yukihiro Kitao.
Do you think Sakuraba composes music while he sleeps?
Yes, absolutely. But
those are the songs that end up in the Tales games.
Yeah, because the original directors for this game was like Joe Asanuma, Masaki Norimoto, and I believe Yoshiharu Gotanda.
Gotanda's basically a founder of.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, so now you decide. I don't know if this Kitao's first director role. Like I know him as a producer from some other project, but I don't know if he's ever directed a game project before. So that's really interesting. As you mentioned, Yukihiro Kajimoto, Infinite on Discovery, main like a character designer, but also did work on the Star Ocean mobile game as well. So direct lineage from that. And then the art director on this one is Yukinori Masuda, who worked on the first 2 Valkyrie Profile games as well, along with TriStar. So pretty interesting staff list that's heading this second story remake. I think I'm really interested, like, what were your guys' first impression when you first saw the visuals of this remake, in that Nintendo Direct, or whatever trailer you saw first, whether you're watching the Direct or the standalone trailer?
When I saw it in the Direct, my thought was, this doesn't look great, but I'm pretty sure if I see screenshots or videos on anything but the Switch, it'll look fantastic, and I was correct.
Yeah,
I can't wait to get this on Switch and be the only person on the site who does.
Can you imagine if Square Enix acted like Atlas and they pretended this game was a Switch exclusive for 2 days?
That would have required Nintendo to pay money to have a company pretend a game is Switch exclusive for only 2 days instead of for 6 months to a year.
And then it still gets leaked anyway before the official announcement.
I only hope my biggest hope for this game, the earlier Star Ocean titles, I still feel like they get a little bit repetitive in the combat, and that once you find the good skills, the best way to play the game is just to
spam them
mash those over and over
Yeah.
and over again. I actually think Star Ocean 6 did a pretty good job minimizing that, the way those cooldowns work in that game. So I kind of hope they make a couple of combat tweaks there, rather than just go into the battle and just spam the same skills over and over.
Yeah, I mean, it still have tweaks to it, but I don't know if it's going to be super meaningful. They do have a break gauge now for enemies, and there's also for party members that you have in your backline, you can actually summon them as assists in battle.
Oh, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, so
I just wonder, what would they do with the voice acting? Would they hire?
Oh, they explained this. It was explained in the asset guide. So the Japanese voices, there's 2 different tracks. There's the original PlayStation 1 cast and the PSP cast. And I believe they're all newly recorded for this.
Oh, remake. So just like the first departure are on the Switch then.
Yes.
Or,
and then it's kind of funny how First Departure R didn't get a Steam port. Anyways.
It didn't?
No,
I guess not. That's wild.
Now the English voices are there from the PSP version, but it seems like it's just the PSP version. They didn't re-record. So the English voices I think are okay. They're not great. I actually do like Eden Regal as Reyna. I'm not so fond of Spike Spencer as Claude, but it sounds like it's got the PSP voices and they're just as they were.
Maybe they have higher quality like recordings, like bass recordings.
Oh, that's true. The PSP they always had that like tinny sound, so
maybe it'll be better.
Bring back the PS1 voices. What are we doing?
Oh my
yeah,
god!
No PS1 English voices.
I would go deaf with all that battle screaming that they do. It's like Xenoblade, but worse.
But that's this is really exciting. I mean, Star Ocean 2, one of the classics. It's been a long time since I've played it. I don't remember the last time I played it. It has to be like more than 7 years ago.
Adam, please write a guide for this so I don't reject everybody.
I'm pretty. I've never managed to get through more than like an hour of this game because I tried the PSP version, and if I remember correctly, one of the things that really pissed me off was that you could not skip through like lines of dialogue without waiting for the voice acting to finish.
Yeah.
I think that sounds right.
And it's such a small thing, but I didn't really care for like the voice acting to begin with, so I was just sitting there while everyone was slowly finishing out their lines, and I was just like, oh, come on, please pick it up. So I'm really excited to give it another shot. This remake looks fantastic.
So when I last played this, I played this as Reyna as my main character on the PSP. So if I do play this, I'll probably just be like, all right, I'll pick Claude and try to get all the different characters that I didn't get before. Not that it's been long enough that I don't quite remember even like the broad beats of the story. So it'll just be interesting to revisit that. One thing I did not state is that I don't think I stated this. This was given a release date. It'll be releasing on November 2nd worldwide. And that is for not only the Switch, because of course it was announced in the Nintendo Direct, but also on PS4, PS5, and PC via Steam. The other major announcement from the Nintendo Direct, so this actually leaked imminently, like a few hours beforehand, and I and many others that I saw were like, this has to be fake. That there's no way this is real. This is just bollocks. This is just someone being a goof. There was remakes for a certain Super Nintendo RPG, Super Mario RPG. It was going to be remade for the Switch. I'm like, that's no way. They're not going to do that. Turns out, Nintendo announced that Super Mario RPG is being remade for the Nintendo Switch. So it's just, as far as we can tell, being called Super Mario RPG. So it no longer has the subtitle Legend of the Seven Stars, which was added for the English release initially in the first place. And then this is a full remake, but made in kind of like the same graphical style. I'm trying to explain that, where all the characters are kind of like chibi-fied a little bit, but obviously rendered in a completely new modern engine.
Time for you to eat crow.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this and I thought that just has to be fake. That there's no way they actually.
To be fair, I heard this rumor like it was bundled with a Chrono Trigger remake rumor. That was
the other one that was going around. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, "There's no way." So
I was a cynic. I was a cynic because I saw people saying, "Oh, there's going to be an HD 2D SNES remake," and I thought they're getting their wires crossed. We're going to see Dragon Quest III HD 2D, and then we're going to see the Fire Emblem remake.
Nope.
0 for 2.
Where is that Dragon Quest remake? I'm losing it over here.
To be honest, I thought that the very first seconds of the trailer where they're showcasing the old graphics from the SNES, oh, they're just gonna re-release it on their Nintendo Online service. It's people just got got worked up over nothing. Then they showed the new 3D graphics overlaid on top. What the fuck is going on?
They learned from Square, okay? They learned not to be like, was that guy, the producer, when he came in and he announced, "Oh, here's Final Fantasy VII." Oh, it's a part of the original. And everyone's like, what the fuck?
What's funny in hindsight about that is that remake had it in production at that point, but he announced the original.
But yeah, I mean, this looks pretty fantastic. It's what you would expect from a modern a Super Mario RPG with a modern graphical style.
Super Mario RPG is kind of like when you think about the RPG part of it, it's sort of like a beginner's RPG. It's not super complex. It's somewhat easy, but it's got this sort of, it's kind of like part charm, but also part just weird to it. It's got a lot of like really goofy, weird, kind of eclectic, strange characters and moments and things like that. And at the time was just very bizarre. Obviously, seeing Mario in this style in an RPG. The game is not very long. I think it's like a 20-hour game.
I'm all for
it's
20-hour
shorter.
RPGs.
Oh yeah,
I think it's even shorter than that, if I remember.
Yeah, if you know where to go, then yeah. It was
Anyway.
very novel for its time, like, absurdly novel for this time, obviously, right? It's
I
like,
think
what
watching
the fuck?
I think watching the trailer, I think now they made the game like super easy. You could actually like see the exclamation mark to know when to hit the button prompts. Because
right.
in the old game, if you press the button prompts at the right time, like for example, Mario does a punch. If you press it the right time, he does a double punch. And now you get to see the prompt when to press it instead of like in Super Nintendo, you just kind of guess when to press it, right?
I think that's
Honestly,
a
I
good
think
change.
that's for the best.
Yeah,
I think it'll make the game too easy.
I will
The game was
say,
alright.
yeah, I will say that I'm very happy for Super Mario RPG fans. I'm sorry, Paper Mario fans. You know what that producer director said, where it's like, oh, the reason why it's no longer an RPG is there's that we have another Mario RPG series. You're never getting it back. You need to just it's over. It's over.
I don't know, man. I mean, like, is it really over? Like, like it used to be super over for Super Mario RPG people for like how many years?
Well, no, but the specific reasoning for why Paper Mario is no longer an RPG.
Oh, like a new one, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay,
so-
yeah.
Rest in peace,
But,
Alpha Dream.
Yeah,
They
like
kind of
Mario and Luigi. I always was a bigger fan of Mario and Luigi. I'm so fucking sad we're never gonna get another
I mean,
one
yeah,
of those.
I think they're better games, but I mean, just like as a like almost like a base ground prototype of like the mixing the RPG aspect with Mario. This is like base level like that. That's
Yeah.
where it
Zero.
is. Yeah. So I mean, it's cool. You get to see Mallow and Gino. Everyone's
It looks
favorite
like
Mario
they-
characters.
It looks like they might have limit breaks now.
I'll be honest, I've played Mario RPG, but it's been so long that I'm like, did they not have limit breaks before? I don't even remember. I
No,
just
don't
remember
think so.
I remember the Axum Rangers. That's
Hell
what I
yeah.
remember. Hell yeah.
And this remake, Mario turns into a fruit and says "fuck."
finally make it a good game.
There you go.
But I did want to kind of like talk a bit about like something about this particular kind of RPG has never clicked with my brain. Not to say it's bad, but that kind of turn-based, but you need to press a button at a specific time thing to do any meaningful damage has never like I can't do that kind of timing. I really don't get what's wrong with me in particular. Like I remember, God, years ago, I tried to play those South Park RPGs, which are barely difficult at all, and I was struggling to do the damage because it's that timing thing that I just can't do. So them adding like markers on like when you need to press to do like what you need to do, I do appreciate that, and I'll probably give this Super Mario RPG a shot finally.
You know what Chow wants? He wants a story focused and action focused mode for this game. And story
Down.
focus brings up those exclamation marks.
Well, I think Colin's never gonna play Legend of Dragoon then. He'll never do those combos successfully.
Nope. I've actually never had an urge to play that game. Never really stuck out to me as something I should go back and play.
It's a whatever game, to be honest.
Yeah. I haven't heard
Yeah.
anything too glowing.
That's another one that the rumors have been out for forever about them remaking that supposedly.
I think that's
I-
more wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Sony would
And I-
never touch that.
And I either hear that it's the most amazing undiscovered gem ever, or that it's hot garbage. Like
It's whatever.
The nuance of the internet.
Yeah.
Remember, man, I got a neighbor that vouched for that game over Final Fantasy X. So
Yeah, you had a neighbor that voucher.
yeah, he's like, I thought you guys are delusional. This game is way better than Final Fantasy X.
That's so
Like-
sick. Do you have a release date on this Super Mario RPG?
November 17th.
Same day as Persona 5 Tactica.
Uh-oh.
I know what I'm getting, and it's definitely not Persona 5.
I'll be there playing the Persona 5 RPG.
There we go. Finally, we have a true fan.
I need SRPGs so bad. I'm so like
Hey, Colin, when are
Parched.
you gonna get back to Utsuarimono?
never fuck those games. They're bad.
Those
Good.
games also have a timing system, right?
You know
Yep.
what? That makes sense then. That at least you're thematically consistent.
Also, I just think they're really boring and poorly paced. I'm sorry.
It's just
Oh,
the prologue. And once you get through the prologue, I promise it'll be good.
I have decided that I am done with it gets really good 20 hours in mindset.
It's okay, Colin. I'm with you in terms of like I tried to pick that game. I tried to start the first game like last year, or was it 2 years ago? I already forgot. But like on my Steam Deck, and then like so something came up, and I never looked back again. And I was like, maybe I should go back. But
You know what? You know what? If you're gonna go back, just skip the first game. Just watch the anime, and then just start Mask of Deception. The first game it's fine, but 2 and 3 are so much better. It's just...
we're getting that it gets good the 30 hours later.
Exactly.
The second game.
Yeah, and it's like I did play the second game ages ago, and I did enjoy it. It's just like I can't do that like
Final Fantasy
long-term
13
investment thing.
isn't good, but the second game is worth it. Just trust me.
13.2 is so good. Honestly, if you're quirky enough, you could just skip the first game and play 13.2.
I recommend
I like the first game because I really like switching through the fucking.
Oh no, me too. But I love 13.2.
13.2 is like pretty fun. It has a really stupid story, but it's pretty fun to play.
Ending left me so bitter. I refuse to get the next game.
I like Lightning Returns, man. It mostly just me and my circle of friends that like Lightning Returns.
No, I hear a lot of positive things about it. People basically said it's a Valkyrie profile light, but it's like, hey, I'm not gonna buy it.
Yeah, your one person party just like FF16, man.
It's like I refuse to buy it.
I don't really keep a backlog, but like one game that I purchased forever ago with intent of playing it and never have is Lightning Returns. Like I will play you someday.
Fun game. Good game.
There were 2 other RPG announcements at the Nintendo Direct, a little bit lower on the register than Super Mario RPG and Star Ocean 2 Remake. One of them was a RPG from Marvelous and Xseed, set in the same universe as Rune Factory. This is a new RPG called Silent Hope. So that's
the same. That's a Rune Factory world thing. I didn't even realize that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, now I'm actually kind of interested.
The giveaway is the giveaway that I saw before it was actually confirmed was the cows. The way that they're animated is like, oh, that's a Rune Factory cow. That's like, yep.
Damn, I wasn't even paying attention to the trailer, so I didn't even know it's Rune Factory related to.
Yeah, so Chow and I are of the same mind here.
Yeah, so this is an action RPG from like an isometric perspective. It looks like something where if it was released like 5 or 10 years ago, it'd be like a 3DS game. And I'm only saying that to just describe like what it looks like, not to like make a judgment call on that.
I saw a lot of people say, and I'm taking their word for it, when we posted this, they're like, it looks like Dragalia Lost.
It does. It does.
I never would have like. That thought never went like through my mind when I like at least saw the trailer once, but then like now I'm thinking back, I'm like, you know what? Maybe they got a point. Fuck. Shit.
In terms of gameplay, then?
No, just in terms of visual style and gameplay, I guess, like the perspective, I suppose. So
that's I have a feeling so complicated about that.
So when is this coming out?
It's coming out in October 3rd. It's coming out a few days earlier in Japan in late September. So this is a game where you can take control of 7 heroes, each with a unique weapon. And I guess the idea is that there is no voices. Like the reason why it's called Silent Hope is because the only person that can speak is the princess. So that's kind of like the I guess the narrative of the game, at least the premise. But it looks like they call it basically an isometric dungeon crawler of sorts. As for what you actually do in the game, what does the player do with the controller?
People bitch about one Silent for that. Now you have 7. Oh shit, that's so over. This game's cooked.
One thing that's sort of interesting, in Japan, this game has a different title, and apparently it's Frederica, like the name Frederica. And it's like, why is that? Is that like the princess's name?
It reminds me of the name of the evil woman from Ace Attorney 2.
I
just think of the triangle strategy character.
Interesting.
Strategy is a more recent cut.
More fitting, yeah.
Okay,
as well.
Chow's like, you know what? I only know one Frederica in video games.
But it's for a game like this, I think landing in October is a pretty like there in the back half of the year. There's not a lot of gaps for like a smaller little title like this. But if there is, like October is at least as of
October
right
is
now,
a little bit better than
September
it's better than
or November.
September and November.
September sucks, dude. I actually listed out September releases once we start
Yeah.
counting more release dates, and it fucking sucks.
You know, if
October's
it,
pretty bad too.
It's not as bad.
I'm
Poor
gonna
fucking
say,
Alan Wake 2. Poor Alan Wake 2.
Why for Alan Wake 2?
It's releasing within a week of the new 2D Mario, Spider-Man 2, the new Sonic game, and there's like one other thing.
jeez.
And Mario
I'm
Wonder
just gonna
Fest
say,
looking-
like, if all these games are coming out from like October to late November, it's like if there's an Inter Nintendo Direct, then that shit's gonna be like 2024, right?
Yeah, I mean,
It's like, oh
we
man,
usually have like a Nintendo Direct in like the mid fall at some point. So
damn. Guess
I
we're
can't
not
believe
playing.
Mario took drugs for the new Mario game.
He always been taking drugs.
I
He
mean,
always
like,
eats
but
mushrooms for a
it's
living.
more explicit now. They're not even like masking it anymore. It's like, no, this guy's a fucking druggie.
Okay, have you played Yoshi Island for Super Nintendo or the Game Boy
Yeah,
Advance?
but it's like,
Do you remember that level with the pollens?
That's fun to
no.
get dizzy.
Yeah, well, I think you should try it. It has a very good.
I haven't played it in a long time. I did play it, but I don't remember much of it.
It's almost like an LSD simulator right there.
Well, speaking of December releases, we did get one final RPG announcement in the Nintendo Direct, and that is the announcement of a new Dragon Quest Monsters title called Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. Now, in Japan, this is actually going to go under the title Dragon Quest Monsters 3. So they pulled a Yakuza Like a Dragon series here, where they decided they didn't want to scare away Western or new consumers with a number. So they gave it a subtitle instead, which I don't know like what side of the line I fall on that
Dude,
one.
they're making Dragon Quest like the sequel to Dragon Quest 4 with this game. That's fucking cool.
What do you mean by that?
That you play as a character, like an antagonist from Dragon Quest 4 that was all about like kind of monster army, and this game's all about how he raised that monster army.
I did not know like that. I
yeah.
figured that this was an original character.
nope,
No,
this character
nope.
is Sorrow, or however you pronounce his
Sorrow,
name.
Sorrow.
Who's basically the antagonist of 4.
Yep.
And then at the end of the trailer, you see the protagonist of 4,
Yep.
like kind of looming there, and it's like, oh, this is gonna be so cool.
So I
my
did
God.
see that, but I just thought that was like a cameo. I
No.
completely had my wires crossed on this.
Yeah.
I do like how
That-
December is now the Dragon Quest month because it's 2 years in a row. Because last year in December was Treasures. So this
I need
year
to get
it's
back to Treasures. It just
I want to
did
get
not
that.
hit.
Did the PC announcement ever get formalized? Was that just still
Nope.
just a leak? That was like a
It was like a
Taiwan ratings
rating.
board or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's just gonna get shadow dropped at one point. It'll just,
Already,
it's like, oh
probably.
yeah, it's out on PC now.
That's so Square Enix.
I mean, how did they announce like Triangle Strategy? It was just like a week beforehand. Like, by the way, it's coming out on PC next week.
And then like Octopath like just came out like on Game Pass out of nowhere without any prior announcement until that day when they like
That
Microsoft.
happens sometimes.
It's just this Square Enix stuff. But yeah, this new Dragon Quest monster looks fucking cool. But then again, like all Dragon Quest monsters, it looks fucking cool.
It does seem a bit like simple, like kind of like a Switch game, but
Mhm.
like it's not the most visually cool Dragon Quest game, but it's still got the art style.
It has a lot of heart. Like,
Yeah.
but it's just like for people who played Dragon Quest monsters game, it's like, yeah, this is our shit.
Yeah, and it does seem like you're kind of more in line with how 11 played a bit as well, and like looked and felt
Yeah.
over
yeah.
something like Treasures, which seemed at first like it would be kind of like a Dragon Quest like modern but like chibi-fied version, and it just kind of felt a bit weird and not too much like a Dragon Quest game.
Treasures is weird because apparently it started as a Monsters game and then it became something else, and now here's another Monsters game. It's like, oh, okay, so what happened with Treasures? Like, that's kind of weird.
But like, I don't think Treasures is a bad game. I need to just
just
sit down and
different.
play more. You know, it's just very different and not exactly what I go to Dragon Quest for.
Mhm.
But I watched this and I geeked out a lot. I love 4. It's one of my favorite Dragon Quest
Oh, 4 is
games.
so awesome. I love it.
I think like that original NES like series of Dragon Quest games, 4 is easily the best, and I love 3, but 4 is just so cool. And
It's-
this was
it's-
just like This
Yeah,
was everything.
It's hard to choose between 3 and 4. I really like them a lot. As long as it's not 2, then we're good.
But because it's so weird. I feel like it was only like last month where we got a coy little like, guys, we're making a Dragon Quest Monsters game, and typically when we get an announcement like that, it's to say like we don't really have anything, and it's gonna be a couple years, and it's just like, nah, it's coming out this year, and we have a date, and it's like, okay,
you didn't really have to tease it like a week ago or whatever.
yeah, it was so weird because I'm looking at this and it's like, okay, this is a finished video game you're making last touches on. Like, this is done.
Meanwhile, Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D.
Still nowhere to be found. I was trying to I mentioned that earlier.
We'll see HD 2D Dragon Quest 3 next December, like 2024, and then 2025 will be 2025 will be Dragon Quest 12.
And can I have a slight little tangent in that same line where it's like, wow, a Dragon Quest 4 inspired brand new Dragon Quest spinoff. That's amazing. Hey, Square Enix, can you please port that to any system that's not phone?
The actual Dragon Quest 4? Yeah.
Yeah, because
they should just do a 4, 5, 6.
They should
to Switch like they did the first 3.
They really should, and I'm so surprised they haven't yet because, in all truth, those mobile versions at their core are very good. They're built off of the DS versions, which are amazing versions of those games.
I think they're like the best version if you don't count the mobile versions, I would say.
Yeah, and like the mobile versions, their biggest like flaw is just they are on mobile. But for 4 in particular, it's a bit of like a sore spot because for in the West, that is the only version of the game that has party chat, and party chat is the best it's ever been in 4. Like, it's really good in 5. It adds a lot of like extra detail to the characters, but in 4, that is where the script is in party chat, and people respond to so much of what you do in that game, and there's so much that builds on the characters.
I think there might be a ROM hack that
there is a patch.
There is a patch.
DS version.
It's not well made, and
that's what I heard.
Yeah, I know on like there's 2 different patches, weirdly enough. There's one that tries to inject it in, and when I did that, all of my characters said error for every single line of dialogue. And then the version what's meant to be just like an English patch for the Japanese version does not let you, like, it doesn't convert the keyboard, so you have to name your main character something in Japanese while everything else is in English. And it's just like, what?
That's weird.
By the way, can you still give any Dragon Quest character your name or no?
I think it depends on the game itself. I think for some of the DS ones, I might be able to. Like, I think 4, 5, and 6, I'd probably be able to, but not the spin-offs and not any of the modern games.
Yeah, if you're
why your name is banned.
Yeah, apparently Square Enix and Dragon Quest and other games do not like Cullen's name.
No, we have an ongoing beef where they think my name is referring to like culling. Murder. Yeah, murder. So I can't do that in Nier Automata. I can't do it in Dragon Quest 11. There was nothing worse than having to name my protagonist 11 in Dragon Quest 11.
Jeez.
Oh no.
I was going to ask you what your alternate alter ego alias is if you can't use your name.
I typically will just look up whatever the canon name is or something, but for Dragon Quest I'm like, yeah, no, I'll just put my name in because my name is like Scottish, which can kind of be like fantasy like, so it's not too like off where like I think when I first played Persona 4, just everyone saying like, oh, Cullen Kun, and I was just like, this is weird, I don't like this.
I still vouch for Soji Seta. Everyone remembers that name.
Oh my god, you're reminding me now, like what they're gonna do for Persona 3 Reload's English script. They're gonna stop honorifics or not?
This is gonna. Oh wow! I
didn't even think about that. Fuck.
Did 5 have honorifics or no?
Yes, but not as they weren't.
I feel like they're phasing
prominent.
it
Yeah,
out.
they're slowly.
They throw them in every once in a while, but in 3 and 4 especially, they kind of have them all over the place, which especially in the English dub is just a little weird.
It's so inconsistent. It was either like they do it or they don't. It's like, oh man.
Anyways, his name is no longer Cullen Black. He is now Bullen Clack.
Mr. Black.
Oh, that's smart. I should just switch it to Bullen. But
like, I don't know, like. Do you
sorry.
ever look at the manuals and do they have like their names? Like I remember in like Final Fantasy Adventure or Seiken Densetsu 1. The main character's name was, people just call him Sumo because the instruction manual had the main character name as Sumo, and people just treat that as the canon name.
Well, I think probably with some of those mobile games that are now gone or whatever, they called him Sumo. I think.
Yeah, because
Bold of you also to assume that games still have manuals.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, the original versions.
No, yeah.
No, nobody looks at the digital manual either these days too.
But
The last time and pretty much only time I ever looked at digital manuals was when it was the Wii U or the Vita, because those digital manuals were actually pretty damn good.
The last time I actually read a manual was for Xenoblade X. I vividly remember this. It was like, how the fuck do you play this game? I was like, oh, there's a manual. I was like, oh wow, there's actually a pretty well made manual.
I have
But,
no idea what the last manual I read was. Maybe like Skyward Sword.
with like this new Monsters game, I was not like I like the Monsters games. I don't like, I prefer traditional Dragon Quest over them. I've never been able to actually finish one of the Monsters games, but like looking at this, like, oh yeah, I'm all in. I'm so ready.
Just treat it like a Mega 10 game. And
Yeah, pretty much. It's just something about those kinds of monster collecting games. Only Mega 10 hits. Probably because they love, like, one of the biggest things about Mega 10 is the combat is snappy.
Yeah, fair. That's true.
And that is something the Dragon Quest Monsters games don't really have because they are very like slower paced.
Mhm.
And it's one of the other reasons why I just cannot stick with modern Pokemon is that it's just so slow.
I tried to do the Pokemon whatever Violet, and I was like, I can't do this.
Speaking of modern Pokemon, there was a trailer. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna latch on to this while you guys give me the opportunity.
Good.
So, there's a new DLC that's coming out this year that we already were aware of as of last February when it was announced. This is the Hidden Treasure of Area Zero. It's a 2-part DLC. The first part is called the Teal Mask and is launching this fall. The second part is called the Indigo Disc and is launching in winter. We got a new trailer for the DLC in general, but still no specific dates other than those general fall and winter timelines. So we got a trailer for the Teal Mask. But I'll be honest here, I was like rewatching the trailer as you guys were talking about Dragon Quest to try to like pull like useful, like I want to be able to speak to this trailer with some like relevant, useful, good information, but I'm having difficulty like pulling anything out of it.
They introduced 2 characters that are in the second part of the DLC. There's like a professor and a student.
Yeah, Lacey and what's the professor's name? Sayano.
Yeah, so they're in like the second part of the DLC, and that's about it. They didn't even give these games. They didn't even give the first DLC a date yet. I was sort of expecting one.
And even in the press release, like the first part doesn't have a lot of information tied to it. It seems like it's all in the second part.
I think they revealed information about the first part earlier, but the first part. Let me look this up. Actually, I don't remember the names of these. It's coming out in fall, and the other one's in winter. So
right,
the Teal Mask is the first part, and Indigo Disc is the second part.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's all I know. That's Pokemon.
I'll just state in general that I do want to get to the credits on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I'm assuming there's credits. Just to say that I did, because I haven't seen Pokemon credits since Platinum, but I still have like 2 badges. I think I've done like 2 badges, 3 Titans, and 2 of the Team Star.
I've actually looked at
the Violet is really, really good, but I still stand by my review where it's like this should have been this holiday's Pokemon title, because if it had if it had even one extra year, man, it was so fucking close.
So I'm looking at one of these official screenshots for this for whatever DLC this is, and like one of these features like 3 sculptures of like these like creatures or Pokemon on it, and it looks so bad because it zooms in on like a texture that they're on what they're standing on, and it looks super fucking just blurry and awful. And I'm like, who chose the screenshot to showcase this DLC?
Remember when Legends Arceus was coming out and people were like, oh man, this game looks bad, and then Scarlet and Violet comes out and it's like, you know what, maybe I was too harsh on you.
I was like just sifting through it, and like they just stood out. I'm like, oh my god. looks bad.
Like, as much as I've enjoyed the last couple of Pokemon games, and I have, they're very, very good games. Something needs to change with the release schedule for that fucking franchise. They need to change it. I know they won't because the games are selling well, selling better than they ever have. But man, this is unsustainable. Something's going to give, and it basically already has. And I just fucking hope somebody at management at like the Pokemon Company and Game Freak realizes this and they start changing like how the pipeline's working for those games, because they need to. Like,
I
they
don't
just
think it's
straight up need to.
happening. I mean, if they put up half the effort and it still sells as much, it's like, do they need to?
It's not
put
about
change?
effort. It's not about effort. It's about the amount of time and resources that are allocated to each game, even though they are some of the most successful games in the entire fucking world. Yeah.
I mean, clearly there's a lot of effort put in. I mean, that's very evident. But like they're very like for Scarlet and Violet, that should be the one you shouldn't be saying that about, because they were very ambitious with that one. That was very not the norm for them.
But it's still held together with like toothpaste.
Yeah.
Now the thing is, like, trying to be even like charitable and positive, like, even if you adored Scarlet Violet, even if you thought those games were really great and you could look past the performance issues, the way that they're marketing this DLC, it's a single pack for 2-parter, like at the single price. It just seems like and it's fall and winter, so a season apart. It's a hard time not to just to like wait for both parts and then jump in, because it seems like out of the two halves of this DLC, that the first part, based on the trailer and the press release, and even like where you go in the game, is just going to be very thin. Is my impression of the marketing for it so far.
I mean, they did a similar thing with the Sword and Shield DLCs, where it was 2 separate releases over a course of a couple of months.
Yeah.
And if it's anything like that, I think it's fine, but obviously you need to see how it actually turns out.
And that covers all of the RPG or RPG related announcements from the Nintendo Direct that I was aware of. We did also get Adam might have a couple comments on this. We got some information in an English language press release for a Japanese release, and that is coming in September. We're having the Japanese release at East 10 Nordics, and we actually got an English press release from I believe it was Clouded Leopard.
So, if you're not aware, Clouded Leopard Entertainment is a China or Hong Kong, I don't remember, based publisher of lots of games, but they do publish like the Chinese and Korean and Asian versions of Falcom games. And a lot of their press releases are in English, and not just for this series, but for other series also. It doesn't mean the games are going to be in English, even in Asia, they're not. But this is actually the first English press release for East 10 Nordics, which is sort of funny. It's like, oh, okay, I can just share the press release, even though this game's actual English version is probably like 2 years away at least. And so this particular like update of the game, it introduced a couple more characters. Falcom is kind of notorious for this, where they've already introduced like 7 characters, and like here's 4 more. Like, we're getting into like some of the NPCs and maybe some of the villains of the game. There's kind of one of the characters named Feria, who is a woman as part of like the tribe, the Balta Navy, that you join or that you kind of work with. And then there's a couple of these Grieger characters who are like these immortal fishmen. There's like
awesome.
Yeah,
immortal fishmen.
Yeah, they're like fishmen, and they don't die. They're immortal, I guess.
That's great.
They're like,
I like how all 5 characters introduced here. For 3 of them, they're these Griegers, and it's age, question, age, question, age, question.
Yeah. And then in terms of the game itself, they introduced the growth tree, which they call the release line. And I'm not going to get into all the details here.
It's a skill tree.
Yeah, it's like a skill tree / maybe some sphere grid sort of elements there, where you can attach different spots. And on the spots, you can put these seeds. And depending on what seeds you put in the spots, you can get different abilities. So I'm not going to get into the weeds here, but it seems like a bit of customization in how you set up your characters. And
like
your only playable characters are Adol and Karja.
What I will say, based off the information we've been getting, is I can understand why. Well, I guess I think Kondo even said as much that originally, like, Kuro 2 was not supposed to come out last year, but they had to have something because East 10 wasn't going to be ready. And like all the information we're getting about East 10, it's like, this makes sense. They've clearly put a lot more like budget, or like at least like time budget into this game than like a lot of their most recent releases.
No,
To see how it turns out.
I wish they have more games than just Yisen and Kiseki. You know, I feel like relying two major franchises isn't sustainable enough, in my opinion.
Well, they're re-released.
Buy the Tokyo Xanadu Switch port.
And Falgana.
Yeah.
I wonder when we'll get announcements of those and who will do them.
We won't.
Does Marvelous / Xseed have something at Anime Expo? Let me check. I don't think they do. I don't think they're even at Anime Expo this year.
I feel their relationship has already been soured.
Oh yeah, it was. It was like I was outright told the only reason they did the Cold Steel 1 and 2 PS4 ports is because Falcom went to them and said, "Hey, do you want to publish these?" And for them, it was basically free money because it was very, very little that they had to do on their end. But other than that,
if you're not aware, I know Falcom fans are very aware, but if you're not, East, the Oath and Falgana, which got a Switch port a couple months ago in Japan, that was originally published by Xseed. Tokyo Xanadu, which is getting a Switch port right around now. It's either just released or is just about to release.
Yeah, it's I think it came out a month ago or like a couple weeks ago.
Anyways, that one was published by Axis Games. So, okay, it comes out on June 29th. So
oh wait, I was thinking Falgana. Sorry.
Yeah,
I still feel bad about how that all went down, because it's very, very clear that the main reason why, like the domino effect that led to Xseed losing like Falcom's main like projects was they didn't do Tokyo Xanadu because they were told, hey, because they at that time they had right of first refusal, and they were like, oh, like obviously Falcom went to them and said, hey, we want you to do Tokyo Xanadu, and they said, we don't want to do a Vita exclusive. If Falcom had just let them know that won't be a problem, or even said anything, they would have done it. And then they probably would have done Cold Steel 3 for Reverie and all that. It kind of sucks for them.
Yeah. And one of the main things that I like about this East 10 little update is like announcing these minor characters, or that the fact that it has a skill tree is kind of whatever, but there's a lot of screenshots that it's kind of nice because, 2 months ago, we barely had an idea what this game really looked like. So now I just appreciate that we have a bunch of new artwork and screenshots for this game, which makes sense because it's coming out in like 2.5 months.
We've been getting a ton of trailers, and they've been like actually looking really like good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
it doesn't feel like that long ago when Adam had to stitch together some stream footage to actually throw up on the YouTube and be like, here's what the game actually looks like. So before we go into like sales updates and a few other announcements and a lot of release dates, Cullen has to step out. So we're going to go ahead and see him off. Thank you so much for stepping on to talk about your time with Final Fantasy XVI.
Yeah, glad to. Always fun to have time to come on the podcast.
Will you share Loop 8 with us sometime?
No, I will not.
Oh, no. Well, obviously, we'll have to talk about it during the Game of the Year podcast.
That's true. It's pretty Game of the Year.
Poop 8 sweep. Let's go. Can we give a reward for worst RPG of the year?
It feels
I think we used to.
Well, it feels a little mean.
Biggest disappointment, and then we decided not to.
I feel like people really hate doing those things because some people might like the game and people hate hearing people shit on the game that they like. So
I understand that absolutely, but
it's mean-spirited. But something's got to come off the list first.
Yeah, I do always like enjoy in the smallest way people who have been like obsessed with hype cycles and then seeing reviews just being like, "Oh, this Loop 8 game sucks," and then see all those people go, "Oh, bros, I don't know if this one's it after all." But realistically, yeah, it's just mainly a disappointing game. Oh well. But yeah, so appreciate being on the podcast and enjoy the rest of the show. I'll talk to y'all later.
Oh, thank you.
Have a good one, Clive Hive.
But Clive Hive, let's go.
Go.
All right. So pretty much all the rest of the headlines here either deal with a sales update or a release date. I'm going to I have them in chronological order, but I'm going to shunt this one up ahead. And that is, I almost forgot that this was announced back in late last year, actually, on December 31st. The announcement of a Fate action RPG spin-off being developed by Koei Tecmo and Omega Force and being published by Type Moon called Fate Samurai Remnant. Went dark for a while, but then it kind of had an incidental upload of a Japanese trailer. Then it got pulled down. Then it got re-uploaded under a few other channels, then got pulled down. And then finally got formally announced that Fate Samurai Remnant will be releasing on September 29th worldwide, September 28th in Japan, with a new trailer and a lot of detail about the new characters. I will hand it over. I've only seen the original Fate anime, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But I'll hand
you
this.
don't more than most people. What the fuck?
I need to watch. What's the second one? Unlimited Blade
Well,
Works.
as I understand it, this spin-off is like a new
It's original story, yeah. So
version. So it's like it's got Fate like elements in it, but it's not like an adaptation of some other property. It's just kind of like its own thing.
Yeah, it's like
You
a
know-
Holy Grail war, but like in the Edo period. So
You
it's
know what,
very-
Brian? I would have bought you Witch of the Holy Night as a birthday present if I knew your address. But I bought you some other visual novel instead because I don't know your address.
So this new
Funny
Fate
thing about
game.
that, Chow.
This new Fate game, the main character is Miyamoto Iori, adopted son of Miyamoto Musashi. And then they don't have the formal names for like the servants yet, which are like the people that fight for them in this Holy Grail war. So you don't know, but you know some of the obviously some of the identities of these people already because they're from other Fate works. Like Lancer is Jean Alter because of her role in Fate Grand Order. We know that Berserker is Miyamoto Musashi from Fate Grand Order in this one as well. We saw a lot. We saw basically all the masters participating in this new Holy Grail war that's happening in Samurai Remnant, and a lot of their character designs. So it's kind of your standard stuff that you would expect to see in a Fate game, and then they showed some of the designs of the servants in this upcoming game. Like Ryder looks like a fucking samurai Gundam. Monstrosity looks kind of cool, and the trailer has some more gameplay of like how it is. Apparently, in this one, which is like a pretty cool twist to it, is like the masters fight alongside their servant, like in real time, so that you can like summon your servant and maybe like take control of them as well in battle. I'm not exactly too sure.
So when I was looking at some of the responses to this news on our social feed, there is some anxiety or consternation or excitement or disappointment. Is this game a Muso game or not?
I don't know. There's the way that like the trailer stitched together, it's hard to tell, right?
Megaforce doesn't just make Musou games. I'm pretty sure it was a Megaforce that did Dragon Quest Builders 2. They just did Wild Hearts earlier this year.
Who did like Persona 5 Strikers? Is that a Megaforce?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like even Persona 5 Strikers doesn't play like a standard Musou
that was
game.
my point.
Yeah. So like they've been good at like varying up the formula of like a standard Warriors game. So I don't think so. Like I don't think it's a standard Musou game if it is, but it's hard to tell from the trailer alone. But there's like other activities to do too, like besides just like fighting out in the battlefield that they showed off. Like there's actually almost like a daily life segment almost in this game. There's like a Grimoire Codex a character that reminded me of the Labyrinth game and also Nier as well.
The Labyrinth game.
Like Labyrinth of Refrain, Labyrinth of
those ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But other than that, the big news was a new trailer, new screenshots and artwork in a trailer for this game. I'm looking forward to. Yeah,
and it's releasing in a very good time.
Yeah, so it's releasing the same day as the Dragon Quest Dai Infinity Strategy game, alongside like a whole bunch of other fucking September releases. It's also releasing like what if you're getting East 10 Nordics from Japan, it's also releasing on the same day as them, pretty much. So it's a packed month. But I want to play this.
It's a packed year from here on out.
Pretty much. This
year's always been packed. I mean, the last 2 years we've been eating good.
I'm happy that there's a worldwide release. It's 8 games have gone for quite a fucking long way when it comes to like getting like the release schedule lined up. So this is cool that there's a worldwide simultaneous release.
And we'll go into the rest of the releases. We do have one sales update before I go into that, and that is the Outer Worlds. This is the Obsidian RPG from 2019. Has sold 5 million copies. And of course, they're working on the sequel to that game. We also saw that Obsidian's working on Avowed that we saw at the Xbox showcase just a couple weeks ago.
Just to be clear, this like detail was actually revealed about a month ago, but it was kind of tucked away in the in Take-Two's investor release. It was like in a graphic where they basically said, "Here's our 5 million selling, franchises," and Outer Worlds is kind of like in the corner. Like, oh, I guess Outer Worlds sold 5 million.
Yeah, because I guess that was the last game released, not published by Microsoft. It was published by
because
Private
Outer Worlds
Division.
2 and Avowed are going to be Microsoft. So
I got to imagine that the budget for Outer Worlds wasn't that high. That 5 million, they're probably really happy with.
Yeah, and it seems like, I think we've talked about this before. I think Outer Worlds was not a great game, but a good game. Maybe it like overstepped its scope a bit. So I wonder how that might be changed for the sequel. We'll see.
Into the releases. One that's already released at the time of recording is that the original English Fire Emblem for Game Boy Advance, released here as Fire Emblem, called Fire Emblem The Blazing Blade with the full subtitle, is now on the Nintendo Switch Online Plus Expansion Pass library. Great game. I don't know if I like the idea of like having to subscribe to an online service in order to play it, but at least it's available to play on something that's not a GBA or an emulator, so that's good.
Well, I mean, it is available to play on an emulator.
Well, I meant like this is an option that's not an emulator. Is what I'm saying.
Just be like me. Just get a real cartridge.
There you go.
Yeah, old school.
Hey, I even have this modified Game Boy right here. These new screens are great. Okay, it's better than what you get from the
my
Switch.
original cartridge from middle school.
There we go. Finally, someone that sounds normal.
And I've been seeing. I don't know if he's updated recently, but watching Chow post his modifications and his little retro emulation things in our forum post.
I love Chow's retro journey. It's good to check up on it.
It's now component cables for the Dreamcast. We're gonna replace Sakura Wars again.
Continuing in order, on August 8th, Tower of Fantasy, which is a free-to-play MMO game from Perfect World Games, is launching on PlayStation.
The interesting part about this, first of all, Tower of Fantasy kind of feels like we have Genshin Impact at home.
It's definitely like sci-fi Genshin, pretty much.
Well, there was like big Genshin news yesterday.
Well, we'll get to that, but Tower of Fantasy. The interesting thing about this is that it's already released for PC and mobile devices. This version, or I guess I should say that version, PC and mobile version, is published and operated by Level Infinite, which is Tencent. This version, the PlayStation version, is operated by Perfect World. And because they're like operated by two different companies, there's no cross anything between the two versions.
Oh, that's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're the announcements, the details, and all the operations, and all your like playing the game. There's no cross interaction. There's no cross save.
Yeah, so there's no version parity at all. Like they're both on their separate set schedules. There's no unification or anything, and there probably won't be because of their arrangement anytime.
What's sort of funny to me, and this is like, stuff that I'm not fully aware how it works, is if you go to the official website for Tower of Fantasy, let me pull this up here. They mention like, it almost sounds like they were almost caught off guard from the Perfect World announcement.
What?
So let me read it here. This is from the official Tower of Fantasy website. Dear Wanderers, recently, Perfect World announced that they will be bringing Tower of Fantasy to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 game consoles worldwide. Upon learning this news, we immediately contacted the Perfect World company to clarify, and they confirmed that Tower of Fantasy will be released and operated as a standalone version of the game, etc., etc. It is sort of funny how it almost feels like Tower of Fantasy itself was caught off guard.
Dude, that sounds insane.
Perfect World announcement, like, our game is being published for PlayStation.
That doesn't sound like confidence at all.
So
Oh god, I had no idea that was like the way that they worded that too. What in the world? That's I
that's like if I don't know. I don't even know how to come up with like an example of that. It's just very weird that our game is being published somewhere else and we didn't know.
imagine if Honkai Star Rail got published to PlayStation, but it wasn't from MiHoYo. It was from it was from, let's say, Activision. And then on Honkai's official website, MiHoYo had to fucking contact us and say it just came to our attention that Activision Blizzard is publishing Honkai Star Rail on PlayStation. We didn't know either. We reached out to them. It's like, what the fuck? That's crazy. I imagine that there was a lot of fucking drama and tension in the office that day. It probably still is. It's like, that's weird.
Video game publishing is weird, man.
That's weird.
Especially for MMOs.
Huh.
Continuing on August 10th, we're going to get the release date of Bancho Tactics. This is like a street brawler RPG that I believe that Josh played during one of the previous Steam festivals. Is that correct?
Yeah. I tried out Steam Next Fest. It was like, I don't know if it was like an early state or something. It was early. I'll give it that. It really impressed me that much. It seemed very simplistic, but it was a very tiny showcase of it. So maybe it'll get better later on. But I wasn't too impressed with what I played at Steam Next Fest. The concept is cool, but the execution is kind of lacking from what I tried out in the demo.
The concept is it's a tactical RPG with a grid and everything. You play as like a delinquent or a group of delinquents.
Yeah, it's like
Japanese
delinquent,
delinquent, which I guess that's the word bancho is like Japanese delinquent.
pretty much.
So
Yeah. So
and they're usually stereotyped with like the pompadour in media.
Like Josuke Higashikata and then the guy
he is
from,
a bancho.
And then the one from Aegis Rim, I forget his name.
And there's a lot of them. One in like
Mob
Psycho and a few others.
And they like to kneel down and like look tough when they're kneeling down.
Mm-hmm.
Also in August, on August 15th, we'll have the PC release of Hammerwatch 2.
Not very familiar with this game, but it seems like there's a certain like co-op PC crowd that likes this like Hammerwatch. It's like a co-op pixel-based action RPG sort of game. But I'm not very familiar with it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it either. The name sounds familiar, but I've never really looked into it. It seems pretty cool from what the trailer shows, though.
And later this year, they did reaffirm the publisher is Modus Games, that a Switch and a PlayStation version are in the works and slated for this year, and Xbox as well. So all the consoles. But this is the PC release for August.
Hopefully, they don't have like no publisher catches them off guard with the console version.
Our game's coming on Switch, right?
Used to us.
Going into September, on September 14th, we have a double whammy. We have the Baten Kaitos 1 and 2 HD remaster. This was the surprise remaster that was announced like back in February. It will be launching on September 14th, with no big games launching shortly before that at all. So it's a very good time for Baten Kaitos.
It's a Switch exclusive, just to be clear.
Mm-hmm. Which that's kind of interesting because like developed by Monolith Soft, which of course is a Nintendo studio now, but originally published by Namco, right? Is it Namco or is it Capcom?
I think it's kind of unclear. For example, Baten Kaitos Origins, if it was published by Nintendo back in the day or in the West, like how much control they have over the name and like who actually owns it. Is it Bandai Namco or is it Nintendo? And then obviously being partly developed by Monolith Soft, which is now owned by Nintendo, but I don't think it was at the time. It's a little bit strange.
Yeah, so Namco is on the box art, but of course,
they're the ones publishing.
Was always a GameCube exclusive at the time. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
There's a lot of like weird like new features that they're adding to this. Obviously, like a fast forward that lets you like speed up like game and Battlefield up to like 300%, which is good. Like I like that. But go for it.
I listed these out a couple months ago because they were all listed out on like the Southeast Asia page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
there's literally like a one-hit kill setting where you just blitz through everything if you're just replaying the game, basically God mode, I guess. A few others.
Yeah. So, and then just like one where you can just go through the game with like no encounters. You just want to travel without any random encounters. So yeah, I mean they just showcased it again in the trailer. I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's
they
great.
showed it in the trailer for the first time, and like,
Yeah.
so if you haven't, very brief opinion of the games. I think the second game is a much better game overall than the first, but the first one has like one of the best. It's got a very interesting twist in it, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Also on September 14th, if Bait and Kaitos isn't your jam, you can play Mugen Soul Z is launching for
There we
Nintendo
go.
Switch on the same date.
Don't we got a review from Zach back in the day?
Yep.
Mugen Souls.
They got like a 10, right?
Yeah, probably.
Damn.
Only a 9.
Wait, what? Are you serious? Was it a 9?
I think he gave it a 7. Like,
No, it's a
really.
9.
What? Come on, Zach.
Well, I mean, slim pickings back in the day. You know what I'm saying?
It's better than Final Fantasy 16, according to
I'm
Zach.
nine?
I mean, opinions are opinions, but
I know, but still, that's very funny.
We already talked about at the end of September on the 29th, Fate Samurai Remnant is releasing. In October, we're getting the release date, at least in the West, for Cry Machina. And this was actually a game I didn't call it out at the start of this podcast, but James actually put up a small feature on Cry Machina. You were able to see it at least in some to some extent.
I played
during Summer
the
Game
opening well, not during Summer Games Fest. It was right before that.
Okay.
So basically, the Tuesday before Summer Games Fest, I was invited to NS America's office to preview some of their upcoming games. They had 5 games there, but it was only like about an hour and a half, 2-hour session, and most of it was like obviously focused on Disgaea 7. So they were like, "Hey, which games are like the most important ones for you to cover?" And I said, "Well, I've already played Monochrome Mobius on PC, and I've played your PC version of Nyuto, so let's focus on Disgaea, Cry Machina, and the Rhapsody games, which is what I put up features about." So,
How's
This
Cry
game-
Machina?
it's very hard to get a an actual strong impression from only 20 minutes at the very beginning. But the one thing I can say is that combat is way better than I expected. It's
Really?
legitimately really good.
What the fuck? Okay.
who's developing this game again? I forget.
It's
It's not Gem Drops.
It's the Caligula effect, folks.
Aquaria?
But it's action combat, which is different from Caligula effect.
That's
so,
true. Aquaria or something like that.
Aquaria.
Yeah, it's I was surprised. Even early on in the beginner moveset, it was oh no, this has perfect dodges. It has air, it has you can juggle enemies in the air. It has a really interesting thing where the bumpers, if you look at some of the character designs for the 3D models, you'll see that there's these guns over either of their shoulders, and the bumpers are what send those out. But there's different guns types you can swap out depending on if you're closer to the enemy, mid range, far range, and it's again very brief, but just from the little I played, I was this is way better than I was expecting. This is legitimately there might be something here. So I'm curious to see more.
So this game is coming out actually in Japan, I believe in July. Let me check.
Yeah.
July 27th.
Late July, and then October 24th in North America, and October 27th in.
Pretty quick turnaround.
Hmm?
Pretty quick turnaround for a non
game.
yeah.
And I guess while we're here, because we went at the start of this podcast, we went right into Final Fantasy 16 talk, deservedly so. But James has put up several. We talked about a lot of the features he put up over the last couple of weeks, but he's been still churning them out over the last 7 days. Talked about Cry Machina. Yeah, talk about Cry Machina. He did mention briefly his time with Disgaea 7.
Yep.
So he put up a preview on that, which is slated to come out also in early October. You also put up a feature on Sandland. So I forget if you were on the podcast where this was announced, but we talked about this being kind of a surprise announcement of the a rendition of the Akira Toriyama one-shot manga.
I would have not, because that weekend was Summer Games Fest. So
Gotcha.
I was probably actually I can check to see for sure, but I might have been playing it when you were still on the podcast. 1 second.
But I remember for Sandland, the initial trailer for it, I remember kind of giving it praise because it's our first time that like this was the announcement of this game. As far as I know, we didn't know this game existed, but it was like a pretty thorough trailer to get us like a lot of different varied styles of gameplay, a lot of art, a lot of environment, and it was pretty lengthy. Like it showed quite a bit. So I remember that being kind of pretty impressive. All the different vehicles and environment. Well, I say all the different environments, all the different types of desert environments that you play through in this game. So what was did you go hands on with this one?
Yes, I did. It was actually really kind of difficult to get hands on, but that's a story for another day. But yeah, it was a very brief, like 15-minute hands on. So it's like I realistically wasn't able to talk about too much. So the thing I kind of honed in on is these vehicles don't feel perfect, but it feels intentional. And that's kind of neat because it makes sense because you're driving on a bunch of sand, like over sand dunes. Like it would be weird if you had perfect traction.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, it seems interesting. But again, I only had like 15 minutes, so not too much you can glean from that. You can read my preview to see what I thought about it. But yeah, interested to see more because it's like I believe they said this is like an Unreal Engine 5 title.
Oh,
Wild.
damn! Wow, what the fuck?
Yeah. But yeah,
And
we'll see.
the last preview that we put up is you put up something for Armored Core 6.
Yep. That was a hands-off preview. The only people that actually got to play that at Summer Games Fest were folks that were part of the judging panel. And obviously, being a genre site, we were not. So it was hands-off. But between everything I saw and from talking with folks that had gotten hands-on, yeah, it looks like it's going to be great. It's like, man, this year is just insane. It's insane. Like even like if nothing else came out this year, it would still be one of the best years for video games of all time. And there's still so much coming out. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And Armored Core 6 is lining up right in that same time span of all the other games in late August 25th. So not explicitly under our coverage, but you know, lots of us, at least a handful of us, will be playing it as well.
Yeah, I did do a feature yesterday about the another like NS America thing, the Rhapsody 2 and 3 remasters / localizations, where like I did play them and I did get a chance to get on hands on, and I put some like impressions. But for me, the main takeaway like playing those was, man, it like
It's
almost
really cool
don't
that
yeah, you
localizing a game that's more than 20 years old.
Yeah, but it's like not even just that. Like obviously it's like the thing that really like stands out, but over the last like several years, like silently, like almost like NIS America has been like the shining example of a company like just straight up like preserving its legacy between all of like the Perny Present stuff and like just all of the like ports of older titles. Like they're still putting out new stuff too, but it's like more companies should be respecting their legacy like this and like bringing these games to more modern platforms. And obviously they're not perfect. We've even talked in the past about how some of these collections have had bugs at launch, but it's like still the fact that they're doing this at all when most companies just don't is like it should be commended. It should be.
I know the Rhapsody port was done by Engine Software and is apparently one of the better ones, like compared to the Penny Presents.
Yeah.
So I know that one's considered pretty good, at least from what I've heard.
Yeah. From what I understand, like usually it's been just the Switch versions of those games that have had issues, and like the PC versions of any of the ones that got PC versions have been pretty damn good. So that's good. Yeah.
And then the last bit of news here, it's a game we haven't heard about in over a year, or just about a year. Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn has been pushed back from a 2023 date to a 2024 date. So there's plenty coming out in 2023. So let it cook. Let it breathe in 2024. And that's all the headlines that I have for this week. So obviously a very clear and concise podcast in terms of the topics that we wanted to discuss. Had a very thorough, nice discussion on, of course, Final Fantasy XVI. Probably not the last time we'll be discussing that game in this format. And then, of course, all the surprise announcements. You know, last week we could not even predict that a Nintendo... Well, I guess you could predict that a Nintendo Direct would happen, but it was announced. We got all the news up. So big shout out to Adam, Josh, and a few others that all made sure that all that information got synthesized and put up on the site. And so we have all the release dates and all the release windows and all the platforms all put together for all those new games. And of course, now we're looking at our release date calendar and weeping that our family is not going to see us in September because we'll have too much to do. But for all the news and as well as all the features that James was able to go through here at the end, those can all be found at rpgsite.net. You can also go to rpgsite.net. I know Cullen, Alex, and others have been working to put together a lot of useful guides for those playing Final Fantasy 16. I'll shout out the ones that I've been using are just the quest list and the hunt list. Just very useful to have on a second monitor just to make sure that you're not missing anything. But as well as
and honestly, that's like, if you're playing through 16, realistically, that's all you need.
Yeah. And then also all the other news sites as well, news posts as well up on rpgsite.net. You can find us on all the social media platforms that YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to search for RPG Site, and you should be able to find us. You can join our Discord by hitting the Discord icon at the top of our homepage or going to discord.gg/RPG Site. And we will be back next week with another episode of the Tetracast. So until you hear from us next time, stay safe and take care. We will talk to you all later.